All right, everyone, we're live. I'm really pleased to be hosting this debate today because I think it's a really important and contentious issue that we often discuss as vegans. So the debate proposition, we've decided to go with a clear proposition, and that proposition is vegans should support the innovation of lab-grown meat. Now, one thing we want to make clear today, this debate is not going to be about whether or not vegans should eat it, it's vegan or not to eat it, or anything like that. Participants might wish to bring that up if they see it as being relevant to their argument. But this is simply about a question of whether we as a movement should be supporting its actual creation, its innovation as a way to mitigate animal oppression. So for the side arguing for pro, we've got Ryan and we've got Jordan. And then on the anti-side, we've got Vicente and AJ. Did we just want to do some quick intros first before we do the opening statements, actually? So I'll start with you, Ryan. If you just want to give a brief introduction of yourself, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm studying science communication, global health, food systems, and political science, ultimately hoping to go into a career that maximally helps animals. So whether that's going into politics as a staffer or a face politician, lobbying directly on the alternative protein industry from like a private perspective, corporation perspective, leaving my options available. And then I also help run some student groups on campus related to helping animals. So I run Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, or ASAP, the UW-Madison chapter specifically, as well as helped with the Animal Advocacy Organization on campus. I also run the chapter for the Good Food Institute's Alternative Protein Project on campus, which works to make research initiatives more possible for alternative proteins, more education, that sort of thing, to get alternative protein advancement to happen quicker. And then I'm also somewhat involved in the effective altruism movement as well. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Jordan, do you just want to briefly introduce yourself?
George, my internet's messing up. All right, it should be fine. Can you hear me, yeah?
Yep, everything seems fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I am Jordan. I run Vegan Camp Out, which is the UK's biggest vegan event. Don't really have a background in anything to do with lab-grown meat. Just thought it'd be an interesting debate to get involved with. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. By the way, just when people are speaking, I'm hearing like a bit of a crackling, like a background noise somewhere. Maybe if those who haven't got headphones on could put headphones on, that might stop it. It might be feedback coming out of their device or something like that. But we'll move now to AJ, if you want to just introduce yourself, who you are.
All right. Yeah. So my name is Armando Antunes, known as AJ in these circles. Yes, I'm a musician turned animal liberation advocate. I do most of my advocacy through, the social media, YouTube, Instagram mostly. That's what I do since 3 years ago. That's what I've been working on mostly. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, AJ. And Vicente, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Vicente Ocqueteau. I'm Chilean. I have been vegan for almost 4 years, I will say. My vegan advocacy is mostly in social media, not only in my personal account, but I also help with making content in a page called Vegan Español. So my advocacy until now has been mainly in Spanish. And yeah, I think that's basically it.
Perfect. Yeah, cool. Well, cheers everyone for those introductions. Brief rundown of the rules for the debate. I'm not going to be too heavy-handed as a mod. I'm only going to step in where it's needed. The only massive rule I can think of is please don't interrupt each other. There might be the odd time because there'll be a bit of back and forth and some kind of that stuff might naturally happen, but please try to let each other speak. We don't want like a shouting match, especially when there's like 4 people in the room, because the audience won't be able to know what's going on. And the other thing is just stick to the debate topic, the proposition, which is vegans should support the innovation of lab-grown meat. Now, I've asked the participants to prepare a maximum 4-minute opening statement that outlines their position. I don't know if they've had time to prepare one each or not. If they haven't, they can improv. That's fine. But what I think I'll do to do this, we'll go one from the pro side, one from the anti side, one from the pro side, one from the anti side. So maybe we can start with Ryan, if that's okay. Ryan, did you want to give your maximum 4-minute opening statement? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I did that. I decided to have headphones, so I thought that was the next best solution. Yeah, I'll get right into things. I'll say, I guess, before we get into the actual lab meet content, I just want to use this time to say the following. I think I want to make a distinction between values and beliefs. Beliefs are what we think is true, and values are what we think is important. And I think this is a critical distinction for this debate, because when we base our identities and our self-worth in part by what we think is true, then admitting we were wrong about something is a major threat to ourselves. But if we start to see ourselves as someone who values curiosity and learning, now changing our mind becomes a moment of growth, and becomes much more important to focus on getting it right than being right. And if myself, my debate partner Jordan, and our two debate opponents, if we likely share similar values, we're all vegans, we care a lot about animal ethics, and we base our identity on these values. If we can base our identities on these values instead of our beliefs, I think that will be useful to keep in mind during this debate. And with that, I guess I'll get right into my thoughts. I think it's safe to say our end goal with veganism, from a pragmatic standpoint, is to get the number of sentient beings that we currently kill per year, 75 to 100 billion land animals, trillions of marine animals, as low as a number as possible, as quickly as possible, trying to get that as close to zero as we can. And it seems like cultivated meat is a tool that we can use to seriously get as close to that goal as possible, especially given that a very sizable amount of consumers from the data we have are opting towards likely to try this product, likely to incorporate into their daily lives. And this can reduce the number of sentient beings killed in the food system by pretty drastic measures. In addition to that, when we think about, what are our vegan values, we're trying to reduce either animal suffering or violation of animals' rights, or some sort of combination of the two. I don't know where you guys lie sort of on a philosophical perspective, but I think both those things we likely care about. And from both those perspectives, whether we're reducing the number of animals' rights being violated or suffering, a cultivated meat innovation, getting it towards price parity, so where it can be as the same price or cheaper than meat, allowing the demand to actually surface, can seriously help in getting the suffering down. Whether it's a pig in a farrowing crate, chickens on the floor, factory farms, we all know the amount of suffering that goes into this. And I think, putting our resources and time into this is certainly a good thing to do. And even in regards to resources and time going into the cultivated meat or lab grown meat space, I don't even think there's that much of a trade-off effect. And what I mean by this is it's not like, there's $1 billion going through the vegan movement and we're sacrificing money that would go towards vegan activism, animal liberation activism, towards cultivated meat. It's not really like that. The money is coming from private investors just trying to make money like any other industry in this economic system. So there may be some small trade-off effects, but I don't think it's a very big trade-off effect. Additionally, there may be vegans or people who are really passionate about caring for animals in the animal rights, animal liberation movement, who their skills are not best suited for speaking out how we do, whether it's on social media or in person. They might be best for making cultivated meat, getting the science behind that, and all that sort of thing. We wouldn't want their talents to go to waste. And yeah, with that, that's all I have for now.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. AJ, I think the little feedback noise is coming from you, because I muted your mic for Ryan's opening talk there and it stopped the little crackle. If you have headphones, please use them. The only other way to mitigate that is either maybe turn your device volume down or potentially mute yourself when you're not talking. But I think the crackling is coming from your device just when people speak. Vicente, if you would like to do your opening statement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as part of the opposing team, I'll begin by giving our general approach to see the forest before looking into the trees. The defense of our position will revolve around three main ideas, and there is a lot to say in each one. And of course, they are connected, and in this introduction, I will just mention them briefly. So first, let's be clear about the proposition of this debate, as George rightly pointed out. It says, vegans should support the innovation of lab meat. So we have to be very clear from the beginning about what veganism is, what veganism is not, and consequently, what us vegans, or shall I say, the vegan movement, should and should not do. So be aware throughout the debate. I'm talking in general to the listeners also. This is not only debating about whether lab meat is a good or bad thing, but also whether it should happen in the name of veganism. So what veganism is? Veganism is the principle that humans should live without exploiting other animals. Just to be clear, from this side, we say that it is not about reducing suffering. We don't say that reducing suffering it's a bad thing, but it shouldn't be done at the cost of animal exploitation. This gives us a very clear and well-defined goal, ending animal exploitation. Since we are in such a non-vegan world, we need to plan the vegan movement accordingly, so that we reach that goal as efficiently as possible by focusing on the root of the problem, the mentality, the mindset that the other animals are commodities that we can use as we please. At the institutional level, this translates into the property status of animals. Therefore, our focus should be vegan education to tackle the mindset and promote it as an obligation. Also, when we can aspire to the institutional change, that is, when we are a significant amount of vegans, and only then, we should demand the recognition that animals have the right not to be treated as property, which implies the abolition of every institutionalized form of animal exploitation, just as the recognition of that right in humans implied the abolition of slavery. Before tackling their property status, any reform at the institutional level is meaningless and even counterproductive, as we will see throughout the debate. On the other hand, we should not do anything that reinforces the root of the problem, which leads us to the second big idea of this side. We claim that supporting the development of lab-grown meat does exactly that. I mean, promoting the mentality that that animals are commodities. In particular, it reinforces their property status, since the development of lab-grown meat tries to address the problem at the institutional level in non-vegan terms. More specifically, the development of lab-grown meat is in line with the welfarist or utilitarian mentality. So its development doesn't have any place in the vegan movement. Why? Because of our third main point, which is the following. The third big point is that welfare reforms, in general, not only are not helpful to the vegan goal, but they are also counterproductive. Since lab-grown meat is a welfare reform, as I will argue, the critique we will present here also applies to lab-grown meat. But wrapping up this introduction, there's a lot to say about each big point, but our general message is that we have to think about these issues as a movement. We are an abolitionist movement, not a reformist one. So we should plan it as such, with concrete goals and coherent means to get to those goals. We want to move from point A, a world full of animal exploitation, to point B, a vegan world without animal exploitation. Not just move in circles or randomly or to point C, whatever it is. We need a clear and unequivocal message. Animals are not things that are here for us to use. Animal exploitation must end. Veganism is an obligation. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicente. Jordan, if you would like to read out, please, your opening statement for the pro side.
Yeah, I didn't write all too much down, but yeah, basically, in a nutshell, I am on the side similar to what Ryan said, but I've tried to make it a little different. I am on the side of vegans should support the innovation of lab-grown meat, because what is happening to animals, as I'm sure we all agree here, is either one of, if not the greatest moral emergency of our time. And I believe that lab-grown meat isn't just a very effective tool at helping that issue, but it's potentially the greatest tool we have, for reasons obviously we'll get into in this debate. And therefore, in my opinion, being against lab-grown meat is a vote for factory farming and the exploitation of animals. Reasons, again, we'll get into in the debate, but that's why I am on this side, because I believe it's not just a good tool, but potentially the greatest tool we have in ending, again, we'll get into suffering versus all the rest, but in my opinion, both the suffering of animals and animal exploitation combined, whichever you care about most, or if you care about both, which I presume everyone does. But yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Jordan. And AJ, if you would like to read out your opening statement for the anti-side.
All right. Okay, so I reject the proposition that vegans should support the innovation of lab-grown meat based on the following. The end goal of veganism is the liberation of all non-human animals from human oppression. To achieve this, what we need is to change the notion that animals are resources and that they can be used in every way, shape, or form that satisfies our selfish human desires. By not only accepting, but also supporting this technological advancement, we are betraying the animals, trivializing their plight, and reducing their entire existence to nothing more than a product. We would be rejecting the idea that their lives have intrinsic rather than extrinsic value. Given that lab-grown meat uses animals for its production, it cannot be considered vegan. To even suggest we support this is a direct hit against our movement that would render us completely useless once we sign up for it. The message we would be sending to non-vegans out there is that veganism is merely a personal choice that only a few of us are able to make, and that those who cannot have full permission from vegans to perpetuate human supremacy over the rest of the animals. Street outreach, cubes of truth, disruptions, even conversations, it will all be made irrelevant if we say to others, I'm vegan, but you don't have to be. We know veganism is a moral imperative, one that everyone can subscribe to, and an ethical stance that does not need of any technological advancement. Justice, freedom, and liberty cannot be manufactured. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, AJ. Thank you, everyone, for your opening statements. And I just want to also thank you all for actually participating in this debate, because I really am grateful for you all stepping forward for this. So, as I say, I'm not going to be too heavy-handed with my moderation at all. We'll go maybe max 2 hours or so, and then we'll open the floor up for some questions and stuff afterwards. But gentlemen, the floor is yours. So I will just hand it over to you now, whether that's one of you making an opening question or anything like that. But yeah, I've done my bit now, and I'll leave it over to you guys. Thank you.
I mean, Ryan, you took off your mute, but I wrote down a few things that both of you said. Is it, we can all decide, shall we just start putting points forward and then have a chat about that point amongst us, or should we already start to speak about some of the things each person said in their opening statement?
I think maybe we could address some of any questions or points people had regarding the opening statements, and then just sort of take the conversation from there and go point by point. Does that sound good to AJ and Vincent?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have so much questions, maybe because we support the innovation. I'm just presuming you guys might have more questions for me, or Ryan, of course. But I mean, do you pronounce it Vicente? Sorry, is it Vicente?
Vicente, yeah. Okay.
Vicente, cool. Yeah, you said at the start that the debate is also whether lab-grown meat should be in the name of veganism, but it should be kind of promoted within the name and the movement of veganism. But obviously that isn't really what the proposition says. Lab-grown meat can be something completely separate. It can even be non-vegan, which is something obviously I'm sure we'll get into in this debate. But obviously the proposition is whether vegans, which is the vegan movement, should support, you know, this external thing. So I don't think it has to be whether it should be in the name of veganism, because they can be two completely separate things. I don't know if there's anything you want to reply on that, but
well, I think that if the proposition says vegans should support something, then when some things happen, if we support it, it will happen in the name of veganism and maybe other things also. I'm not saying that it will be exclusively from vegans, but it will happen. It will have our signature, so to speak. And I don't think we should do that, because I think, as I said in the introduction, we have to tackle the root of the problem. And if we don't tackle if we do something that doesn't tackle the root of the problem, at least it shouldn't be contradictory to the problem that we want to tackle, which is what happens, I will argue, with welfare reforms. For instance, I will give you a brief example of, for instance, if you go to rescue an animal from a slaughterhouse or a farm, whatever, that doesn't tackle the root of the problem, but it's still okay, because there's no collateral damage, so to speak, in any other way. But with lab-grown meat and welfare reform in general, there is some collateral damage, which is the message we are giving. In particular, we are not giving the message that veganism is a moral obligation.
I'm curious, do you think that a potential, if you're worried about compromising on the vegan message, is the potential for cultivated meat to reduce the number of these sentient beings killed, had their rights violated, suffering greatly by the billion, outweighed by some concern we have over our message? Like, that doesn't seem intuitive to me. I guess I'll ask that.
I want to emphasize the perspective of a movement that we have to have here. It would likely happen, lab-grown meat, but if it happens in the name of veganism, what happens then? Then people will be eating lab-grown meat, and we will say, oh, if we say to them, now you have to be vegan, they will say, like, but weren't you vegans promoting this thing? Why now are you telling me to go vegan? Or are you suggesting that we should be okay with them eating lab-grown meat? And would you call them vegans if they only eat lab-grown meat? I'm not sure. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Ryan, I don't know if you want to say anything, but and George as moderator, I don't know if you want to step in here, but just Vicente, because you said, and obviously you didn't necessarily say whether you agree with it or not, but because you said lab-grown meat will happen anyway, but this is about whether vegans support it, that's kind of, in a way, two different debates then, because you might think that lab-grown meat is a good idea and that meat eaters should support it, but that whether this debate is about whether we should support it. So could you clarify your position that it is against lab-grown meat in any sense, or is only your problem against vegans supporting it, but that you do want to see lab-grown meat supported and funded by non-vegans?
No, I have the two problems for me. First, I think that it is damaging in itself because it's normalized. It reinforces the property status of animals. It just makes people feel better about animal exploitation. So it's in itself, I think, wrong. But I also said it would likely happen. I'm not sure if it will happen, but it will likely happen. And if it does, it shouldn't come from the vegan movement. For instance, let's think about any other welfare reform. For instance, I don't know, happy eggs, free-range eggs. Is it better in some sense that hens have more space to when they are exploited? Maybe. I'm not sure if it does, but maybe. But if it happens, it shouldn't happen because vegans support it. Because I remember when I was just beginning considering veganism and all of that, I remember buying free-range eggs because I said, oh, look, even the animal people support this. It's like, if vegans support this, then what is left to non-vegans? They would just say, oh, if vegans support this, it is okay. We just normalize animal exploitation.
I mean, the differences with that, of course, is, as we all believe here, the lesser of two evils for like free-range eggs and all of that kind of stuff still does violate animals' rights and exploitation, even if there was no suffering. But, and again, we'll get into this point a lot deeper, I'm sure, in terms of like taking the cells in the first place. But given, like you said, that's probably going to happen anyway. And actually, with some cultivated meat companies, they've already said that all the cells they need to take from animals have already been taken. And so therefore, it's quite a different argument to like the free-ranged eggs or more space for animals, because you still have the animals involved. Whereas with lab-grown meat, we can essentially, this might not be the case for all companies, I'm sure it won't be, but at least for some companies, they can now create an unlimited amount of meat without any animal being in the picture. So it obviously is different for that reason. But like you said, you're not necessarily too sure on whether you think more room for animals is a good thing or not. But I just wanted to clarify, even if vegans aren't the ones supporting and pushing lab-grown meat, do you think that lab-grown meat becoming a thing and most likely happening, like you said, is a bad thing, or you're just indifferent to it? Or do you think that's a bad thing if lab-grown meat becomes the main use of meat as opposed to like farming and factory farming?
I think it's a bad thing because, first of all, we are vegans. We are not vegetarians. The problem, we all know, is not just meat. We have to make very clear that animals are not commodities, and with that, the effect is that it will, as I say, it will normalize that mentality. And let me also say something. Even in those companies that may reach the point of just using cells perpetually and not using more animals, there's a reason why these lab-grown meat, the current ones, are only about pigs and chickens and cows and not dogs and humans and cats. Why is that? Because people don't see generally dogs, cats, and humans as food, and that is precisely the point that we want to tackle. The fact that people want lab-grown meat, I'm not sure about that, but if people want lab-grown meat from cows, pigs, and chicken, it's because they still see them as food, and we have to tackle that. We have to oppose that as vegans. That mindset.
I mean, just to make very clear, that's actually not true. I don't know if you've seen the viral article saying that a lab-grown meat company are making a lab-grown meat out of a mammoth that humans haven't eaten for 3,000 years. So that's actually not true. People are starting to experiment with actually extinct animals that no one in our families or even our families' friends have ever eaten. So there's that point. But more to the point, that even if it was the case that we're only experimenting with the animals that we eat, I don't see that as a bad thing. That's just a cultural thing. Like, of course, we're going to mimic the animals that we eat. We're not going to start. I mean, some people might, but there's no desire for sure. Like, that's like saying like, oh, the plant-based versions we have of beef and lamb, we're not generally eating plant-based cat and dog. It's like, well, yeah, because people don't eat them products and therefore they haven't got a desire for them. But do I have a problem with vegan, I'm talking actual vegan now, like plant-based versions of cat and dog, if people want to know what that tastes like? No. And do I have an issue with lab-grown versions of cats and dogs? No. Is it going to happen? Probably not, because people don't have a desire for them animals. But I don't think that really connects to whether it's ethical or not. That's just pointing out the animals that we eat in our life. Like everyone here believes, if we did start, at least say in the UK and in America, to start breeding cats and dogs for meat consumption, well, that's no worse than pigs or chickens. And none of us would really be surprised by that, because people, for whatever reason, we mostly all did ourselves, do like the taste of meat products. It's just so happens to be that we see cats and dogs as pets and the rest as animals. But yeah, so I don't think that the fact that we are mostly concentrating on lamb and pork and chicken in lab-grown capacities touches on whether it's an ethical issue or not. Like, it makes sense that we're doing that. But like I said at the start, there are actually companies that are trying to come up with like rare and exotic and even extinct animals, because you can, when the world is your vegan oyster in that sense. Like, you can start to experiment with eating meat in an ethical way that we never thought was possible until about 5 years ago.
And if I could add on real quick, I think what we care about is the actual animals killed, not the idea that certain animals are okay to like eat, put in our mouth and taste good. Like, we have plant-based chicken, plant-based beef that models the taste, tries to model the taste of those specific animals we're eating, but no animals are killed for it, or we're reducing greatly the number of animals killed for it. We view that as a pro. The exact same thing would now just be for lab-grown meat. The taste itself is closer. And I guess I also would want to add, if you think cultivated meat is likely inevitable, wouldn't you want the vegans being the one in power, the ones in charge of this revolution? So they're the ones in control of the morality behind it. I'll give you a chance to respond, and I'll give you an example of this playing into effect after.
Okay, well, first I will address something that Jordan says. Well, it will be sad to expand now the animals that we consider food, I think. But I'm not saying that it will necessarily cause exploitation in itself. I'm saying that it's an indication of that the problem that we want to tackle is still around, that we consider animals as food, or things in general that we can exploit. And about what you said, Ryan, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, but plant alternatives are plants, are not actual cells of animals. We really have to tackle the mentality behind it, I think. And also about the reduce of numbers, let me ask you a question. Imagine the proposition of this debate was called "Vegans should support animal experimentation for plant-based nutrition research." Would you be in favor of that proposition or against?
It depends. Are we certain that the research has a very high probability of reducing billions of animals being killed and the number experimented on would be hundreds or thousands? Then absolutely. And that already happens. There are plenty of plant-based products in the market that a few animals had to be experimented on. It sucks. It's horrible. But if we know that those products reduced billions or millions, hundreds of thousands, some threshold of being killed, slaughtered, yeah, that's going to be a pro. And I don't think that's welfareist. I think that's towards abolition. You're reducing the number of animals.
AJ.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, but these plant-based companies that experimented on animals and everything, for a moment, they still fail. I don't see the billions and billions of reduction of animal suffering or exploitation. And these foods have been around for quite a while now. They're not so new anymore. And it hasn't achieved what they were supposed to. So it's like it's a product that exists there in parallel to the already available animal exploitation. And in fact, more animals are being exploited and killed every year. So it's like these plant-based products are just that, just a product. And the same fate awaits the lab-grown meat stuff. It's just going to be another thing that's going to be out there that no one will buy, no one will care about it. And at first, it might see a boom in it, just like they saw the boom in the plant-based stuff. But after the novelty passes, I don't really see it. Like, it's just going to go on a downward spiral to nothing because it doesn't address the actual issue. So it's just a product. That's what's going to be. Like, we have cars, we have motor cars, but we still ride horses. So it's just another product. It doesn't solve the issue. Yeah. So that's my take on it, at least on this point.
But hasn't riding horses gone down extremely high? I mean, maybe there's more people, so maybe more total horses, but as per capita, hasn't that gone down extreme? The point I guess I'm getting at is, you're saying it's not tracking what we care about. I think it is tracking what we care about. At least what I care about is the animals being killed. And if that reduces that greatly, I think that's a win. We also have, you mentioned that these plant-based products haven't done really anything to reduce that. I actually don't think that's true. We have data from Faunalytics that shows the animal slaughter count per year. And then if you can add into that the vegan population times what the vegans would have been eating animals otherwise, in conjunction with pricing or piecing out which one of those are from alternatives, you can see the actual animals saved from those things. So I actually think that's just not empirically the case.
Well,
if I can,
I mean,
oh, go on.
yeah, no, you
I
can.
was just gonna add in to me, Vicente, it sounds like personally there's a bit of a contradiction in what you're saying, because if it is about the mentality, then plant-based products should matter. Whereas if it's about the product itself and whether there's an ethical issue in plant-based products or lab-grown, then that's a different point, because if it's about the mentality, then it's not about the product, which was the claim you were trying to make. And therefore the mentality of us eating, pigs and chickens and sheep does still connect to the plant-based point that I was making, that it's the mentality we have is that them animals are the animals we want to eat as a society, and that's why the plant-based products mimic them animals. But then you said something like it changed to, but at least that's not the cell of an animal. But you started with saying it's the mentality of why we want to eat them animals. So I think there's a bit of a contradiction there, personally.
No. I mean, I understand what you say. It's just they are sold as plant food that want to mimic. It's not, here is the animal, really. Here is animal tissue, because animal tissue is food. The other case is these are plants that are mimicking. It's different, the message. And also, I am not suggesting that
the mentality
plants,
is the same, is the point I was making. Like, both are mimicking
it's not the same.
them animals because of our mentality.
People know they are eating plants when they are presented a plant-based alternative, and
people would know that they're eating. And people would know. Like, this is the thing; it can kind of go round and round, because people would also know that they're eating animal tissue as opposed to real animals that lived. But you've obviously got to make the argument as to why there's an ethical issue with that, which obviously just, only half an hour in, an ethical argument hasn't really been made as to why there would be an ethical issue. Now, there is the whole, obviously, taking cells of animals, which we can get into, and that's where it divides into kind of if we care about the bigger picture or not. But as we said, there are obviously companies that can do it without needing to ever have an animal involved again. And therefore, I don't see a moral difference between someone eating a plant-based product that is getting actually very close now, when we're getting plants to mimic blood to be in there, and we're actually finding plants that have the same or a similar DNA, molecular structure to animals, and from eating animal tissue that's purely made in a lab. I see both as the same from an ethical point, and I see both the same from a principle, like mentality point. That the reason we want both of them products is because society, for the most part, has always eaten meat, and we want to be able to eat them products without causing exploitation or suffering. So I just don't see the issue.
I see the issue, because exploitation begins in the mentality that they are things, they are food. And well, there's two issues that we talked before that. Is it wrong in itself? I think so, because of the mentality, and it's also wrong because as a vegan message, as a vegan movement message. And I also want to address something that AJ said, is I support, I'm fine with plant-based product, explicitly vegan, explicitly plant-based. I'm fine with them, but I don't think they will cause the vegan movement to advance. It's fine to make the life of vegans easier, to have more options to try, but that's not what makes people vegan. What makes people vegan is the change of mentality, and that is sustainable.
Exactly.
Because when a new product comes, it has a peak, a boom, but then people, if you don't change the mentality, are we really? Do animals really depend on people liking it enough to change their mentality of animals?
I would actually definitely agree that obviously the change comes from the mentality. I just don't think how that interacts or contradicts the reasons vegans should support lab meat. For example, last night I was doing a cube here on campus, and we had a really one of the people was really receptive, and she got the vegan message. She understood the hypocrisy. She understood how aligning her actions with her values. She got it. She's also studying biochemistry, and at the end of it, she asked, what can I do about this? I told her first about speaking up, all that sort of thing. And then at the end of it, we started talking about, what can we do with, our lives, our careers. And as going into biochemistry, this space, cultivated meat, is something that she could put over 80,000 hours over the course of her career into. And I don't think we should be shying away from that. And so I don't think we have to pick and choose. Vegans who understand the moral imperative of it, but at the same time work pragmatically to get the number of animals killed down, I don't see why that's a problem. I mean, unless do we have like any empirical evidence that a wanting for a change in mindset is going to reduce the number of animals killed in the long term quicker and keep that way over cultivated meat? I can see minds changed in the future, just how technology changed in the future. Like, is there any evidence that these minds that need to be, changed can actually like happen as quickly as getting the number of animals killed down through cultivated meat being like a food revolution?
Well, I think that well, go on. Or
yeah. I mean, even I remember that even George said it himself, that no one has gone vegan because they saw a cupcake recipe online or something. So it's like you take the vegan stance or the vegan principle because you start seeing the animals as the individuals that they are, and you consider their lives, and that's it. You respect them. You don't want to do anything to them anymore. You want to set them free. And from there, yeah, sure, you can grab like a plant-based cupcake, whatever it is, but you don't eat the plant-based cupcake and then go, oh yeah, animals should be free. Like, that's not a thing. That's just a product that they're selling you. And these companies, they never give a vegan message. They're not activists. They're CEOs and everything. They do these sketchy things. We've seen Deya doing an advert with like an actual beef burger, and with it's ridiculous. And BioLife with the message that we're vegan, but you don't have to be, and other such companies. And these lab-grown places, or I don't know, startups, they're working with whom exactly? You say, oh, it's private investors. Yeah, but which animals are they taking these cells from? Consenting animals, or animals who are already slaves from the farming industries that they're taking these samples from? So I don't know, why not take these samples from consenting adult humans instead of and just make human burgers? Why do we take from the animals? That's the thing. Even if we could replicate their cells forever, like, doesn't make any sense to me.
can I?
I mean,
say
if you want
something,
to, yeah, go on.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to address that. I have a problem also with thinking about addressing institutional change right now, because the current paradigm, that is what we need to change, is heavily non-vegan, is welfarist, and so every change that we want to make, it will be in non-vegan terms. So how can I put it? Since animals are property, their interests will always be bounded or by the interest of their owner. So we couldn't expect much change unless we really propose benefit to the animal exploiters. So I don't know why are you so optimistic by making in general institutional change without addressing the property status of animals, which is something that we can only end in a more vegan society, when we are really there is really social pressure to change that. But if we are 1% of the world vegans, we can't make that change directly to the institution. We need to gather more people first. I also have a problem with that.
As we get more and more into the debate, it's becoming more and more clear to me where sort of the crux of the issue is. And I think this might be a good time to ask, if we were in a hypothetical scenario where we had an animal exploited, so it's against the principle that you guys and I share as well, but there's also competing norms. So if we could have one animal exploited to prevent 1,000 less animals exploited, arguably to an even more significant degree, would you guys be in favor of that? Vicente and AJ?
But under which context? Because you're saying, oh, it's one animal exploited to save thousands or something like that, but we can save the 1,000 without exploiting the other one. Like in this case, in the real world that we have, we don't need this hypothetical. We can just leave the animals alone.
Yeah, but the hypothetical is that question, and so
but it doesn't give me any context.
You can have whatever, lots of different contexts. Maybe Ryan can give a better one, but I don't know. If a farmer says, look, I need to keep killing and exploiting animals in the way I'm currently doing, but I've come up with a system that if I can kill and exploit one more animal, means that I can then end my farm, which he would have killed an extra 1,000 animals. Would you say, like, no, I will not sign off on that decision? I think you should go vegan. You're obviously not going to, so carry on as you are, and he's going to exploit and kill the 1,000 animals. Or are you going to sign off on the decision that says, okay, kill and exploit this last animal, and then shut down your farm, and then X number of animals? That kind of tests the question you're asking, right,
okay.
Ryan?
I mean,
right. But no.
The hypothetical is, you are putting us in a dichotomy, in a tragic situation when we just don't have a moral alternative, but we do have a moral alternative in the reality. So it's not really an hypothetical that resembles the current situation. We have the opportunity to make people vegan and promote it as an obligation. And also a point about what Jordan said. Imagine we were in the abolitionist movement for slavery, for human slavery, and let's say that, for example, in the context of cotton fields, the slave owners propose. They say, we are developing a machinery that will be controlled by slaves, and it will make the cotton, work much more efficient, and it will be better conditions for the slaves, and far less slaves will be needed. And now the next question is, should the abolitionist movement for slavery support the development of that machinery? What is the message then? So we are okay with slavery as long as we reduce the number. We want to abolish it.
I'm very cool with answering.
Is it better to have less slaves, fewer slaves, than more slaves? It's better, but we shouldn't promote it. That's very actively supported.
I'll totally answer that question, but before I answer that question, I want to get an answer to the question before that, because it seemed your answer was, I gave you options A and B in the hypothetical, and your option, and you gave an answer was, well, in the real world, we have option C. I'm not interested in that. For the sake of this hypothetical question, option A, you have 1,000 animals killed. Option B, you bring in another one to be exploited, and then 1,000 animals are not killed, not exploited. Between those two options, what world is better, world A or world B?
I mean, well, the better is in that context is less, but we are in a tragic situation when we have to choose. For instance, if you think of the accident in the Andes mountain, when the plane crashed, and the people there had to eat the corpses of the dead people there, they were in a situation, in a dilemma. But it's a tragic situation. But you wouldn't use that hypothetical to apply in the real world and to promote an institution based on fewer animal exploited. That's very different from being in an urgent situation when you have really no moral choice. But to propose an institution based on that is a different thing.
To be perfectly honest, I didn't understand if that was an answer for option A or option B. If you could start by saying you're pro option A or pro option B between the two, and then give the explanation, I'd appreciate it.
Sorry. Which option requires less death?
Less total death, option B.
Okay, B is better, but that shouldn't, that tragic situation when you have to choose between these two doesn't mean that we should now propose an institution based on that killing or exploiting fewer individuals. It's not about the numbers we have to promote. It's the change of mentality that animals are things for us. We have to be more concrete also. I don't know. If we have a vegan movement, we have a goal, we should have a plan that points directly to the goal. I don't know what's the place in that plan of lab-grown meat or welfare reform in general. I think it put us backwards, really.
Yeah, I think the word tragic in that is quite interesting, because whilst I would never deny that for the one individual it's tragic, I would see a world where, and obviously it's not 1,000 either, it's, you know, hundreds of billions, but I would see a world where, especially if we were talking them numbers like 1 to 1,000, where our current system was killing and exploiting 1,000, and we were able to come up with technology or moral arguments that got that down to 100th of 1%. I wouldn't see that as tragic. Like, that doesn't mean we haven't still got work to do, but I would see that as like an amazing moral progress. So I don't see it as like as extreme as, oh, that's still such a tragic decision to make. It's like, if you can save like 99.99% of the issue you're trying to tackle, then that's amazing. Like, that doesn't mean there isn't still more work to do and we should all just go home. But I see that as a big thing. And to your point about slavery, I'm sure Ryan would be the same. But and it's a hard thing to do, because we wouldn't be able to make a slave made out of cells that was then, and I know that if I said robots, you would say, well, a robot isn't a slave. So the only example we could give is that we have slavery and they're making all these products, and then there could be some lab grown version that could make, let's say, like human hands that would still react as hands with like the cells and everything else to pick the cotton instead. Like, you're trying to make the point of, would that be good slavery abolitionism to kind of support that? I would be making the point that that would be terrible slavery abolition if we were to say, no, let's stick with what we have because of some kind of idealistic principle that no slave hand, whether it's a real human hand, a living human hand, or a scientific hand, like, I would see that as terrible for the slavery abolition movement. And if I or anyone in this chat was a slave in that, I would be so angry that the people who were trying to help me would vote against that proposition for scientific like advancement that would mean real, because we all agree it wouldn't be real animals who were being exploited and killed. It's this like scientific, you know, some meat eaters would call it like Frankenstein kind of thing. I mean, that's fine, and that's another point, but the point is they're not real living animals. And so if we could have slavery that didn't involve real living humans, why wouldn't that be like an amazing
thing? That wasn't
thing?
the example. That wasn't my example. Maybe I said it wrong. I meant that to develop machinery that are controlled by slaves, but slaves are living, breathing human slaves that control the machinery, but it will be more efficient, so it will require fewer slaves. So my point was about the number issue, that we shouldn't
promote.
That's
a bad argument to what we're discussing, because it wouldn't be animals who are still controlling the equipment to make lab-grown meat. It removes the animal, and so your slavery context, I think, to be fair, needs to remove the human slave, not have human slaves still controlling the equipment. Because I agree, if they're being controlled and forced against their will, as opposed to like, do you want a job using robots, which we already have and we're all cool with that, but if they're being forced against their will, then that isn't the same argument that we're debating in the lab-grown meat context.
No, it was an argument for the previous point, just about the number of reducing the numbers of animals exploited. In the context,
I guess maybe like a more just like easy pictures, like in the human slavery example, like you take one of those slaves and then you kill them and you use their body parts to make a machine that now does the labor of 10,000 slaves or 1,000 slaves. Like, it seems like that sounds good to me. Like, it's not as good as no slaves at all. Like, you still have that one. But if the likeliness of getting it down to 1 versus getting it down to 0 is so much higher versus, then that sounds like obviously you ought to do
but
that.
at the cost of partnering as a movement with slave owners, and that's one of the problems I have with this lab-grown meat thing. We are partnering with animal exploiters and with welfareists in general. What happens then? Now vegans are with animal exploiters. That's my problem. And now vegans aren't promoting veganism as an obligation. Now people can. It's okay if people decide not to go vegan now.
What do you mean by partnering with animal exploiters, and what do you mean by problematic in that context?
Well, for example, in the example of slavery, if we support the development of machinery that will reduce the number of slaves, and likewise in the animal context, if we partner with institutional animal exploiters to make, I don't know, exploitation more humane or reduce the number of animal or exploited animals, that is partnering with animal exploiters, and it always comes with a cost.
I mean,
since animals are property, we always have to refer to the interests of the owner, of the animal's exploiter, to make any change. So it will always be meaningless, and even if the changes go with the interest of the slave owner, of the animal exploiter, then it will just promote animal exploitation. It will give a seal of approval of humane slaughter, humane exploitation, I don't know, all of that. So it normalizes animal exploitation for people.
And with lack of a better term, I think we do work with animal exploiters all the time in terms of things like every time we eat plant-based food, pasta, to take an example like that, wheat was very likely got to your plate through people who eat and consume animals, non-vegans.
No. But I mean that the institutional animal exploiter. I mean for example, if we go to an egg, for example, factory, and we partner with them to make free-range chicken and all of that, that is partnering with the institutional animal exploiters. I'm not saying that, for example, in the plant-based companies, yeah, maybe they are not vegans, or we are partnering with non-vegans, but for a vegan goal at least. But
like, isn't that just...
but free-range eggs are not going to the vegan goal.
Yeah, and we're not advocating for free-range eggs. We're advocating for eggs where no animals were used for that egg, other than a very small amount.
But both
it's not in perpetuity.
Yeah, but
we're not advocating for that.
But both normalize the idea that animals are and their secretions are food.
But don't you see how we understand there's a distinction between free-range eggs. I understand it's literally causing the animals to be used, and it's reinforcing the idea. Plant-based foods, it's not using those animals, and it's not reinforcing that idea to you. And then lab-grown meat, it's not eating those animals, but it is reinforcing those ideas. Well, what's causing the distinction between the plant-based and the lab-grown meat? Is it the fact that it's literal animal tissue?
In part, yes. And also generally, they still involve animal exploitation. And you may say, well, we are working on getting to don't need them, but...
No, but there's some companies that don't already. So we could concentrate just on them companies for the sake of this debate. But I imagine me and Ryan would support the companies that did either do or did need to exploit in the original sense, which I guess is that point about outcomes and, bigger picture. But there are plenty of companies that don't ever need to exploit animals even at the start, but by the sound of it, you're still against those companies unless your position is a bit more less black and white than that.
Yeah, and on top of that, the companies that are quickest moving away from using the most use of animals to get to the cultivated meat, where they don't have to use serum in perpetuity, where they don't need stem cells anymore, are the ones that are being led by vegans, are the ones being led by these initiatives. If we want this to happen,
I oppose those vegans.
The one pioneering this space.
But it's the same example that I told you before, that vegans should support animal experimentation for plant-based nutrition research. You said you would agree with that if the outcome were favorable in terms of number. But I think
It
we vegans
depends
should
on the
disagree
threshold.
with
If it was 1 to 2, maybe not. But because I think it's at least 1 to 1,000, could be 1 to 1,000,000,000, of course.
Well, I think
I
we
don't-
vegans shouldn't support animal experimentation.
But I
And
think
that is
that's
an
actually a
equivalent case
different.
with lab-grown meat.
I do think that's a different question anyway. Like Ryan might still support that, I might that, but I don't actually see that as relevant to the point, because again, it is the argument of harm is done to animals, but if it's for a greater good, is it okay or not? We don't need to apply that question to what we're saying here, because there are plenty of companies that don't need to exploit on animals at all. Like there's an entire marketing video on YouTube of a company who went to a sanctuary, so fully vegan enterprise, picked up a feather that had fallen on the floor and made chicken nuggets from that feather. So again, by introducing this argument of, oh, would we approve animal experimentation for vegan products? That's a great question, and we can spend time answering it. But it doesn't have to be the question that we're discussing with the lab-grown meat situation, because there doesn't always need to be exploitation for a bigger picture. There are companies who have and who are going to do it without any use of an animal, unless you call literally picking up a feather off the floor as use.
It is just it is animal use, and I oppose it.
So if a human had a chicken and a chicken's feather fell off, and they took that feather inside to give to their kid, and they were like, look how cute this feather is, you would think some ethical issue is happening to the chicken?
Yes, especially it's a matter of context. It's also, I think it is, but it's also a matter of context. We are in such a non-vegan world that we really not be permissive, not in the slightest way, of giving this notion of, we shouldn't be permissive of the idea that animals are things, especially in the context we are. That's my point.
But that doesn't have to be That doesn't have to be things. They could be mesmerized by that feather because it's so beautiful. It's not like, oh, this feather is an object from. I don't see how you would look at a feather and think that chicken is now a thing. If anything,
you just described it.
Admiring the. If anything, admiring the feather is going to. Pardon?
You just sorry. Go on.
No, I was just going to say, if anything, in the context I gave of taking a feather and giving it to your child, and that child writing about that feather and putting it on their wall or taking a photo, that's more admiration for the chicken. You can't show any evidence, I would imagine, that admiration of that feather takes away personhood from that animal and starts to make either the parent or the child see that chicken as a thing. It's more likely to be the opposite, that they appreciate the chicken more.
You have the chicken there. Why take the feather? But you brought that point exactly to point out that some companies from that feather, they now make an institution that is making meat or I don't know, animal products.
Yeah, so that's way better. The person who takes the feather and gives it to their kid is like a morally neutral act. The company who takes that feather and saves billions of chickens, and by the way, even if it's one, we would still be arguing that that's a good thing. But the fact is, it is going to save billions of chickens. So that's a way better decision than the parent who just gives that to their kid.
But you're reinforcing the idea that they are food. I don't understand what is.
But plant-based
that is that is where the
well.
context. What is? Sorry, there is. Sorry, English. That is where the context thing came into the argument also, that we're in such a non-vegan world that sees animals in such to a very large extent that animals are things, that we shouldn't be permissive in the slightest way, because it's too unstable. It's not. It's very likely to turn into animal exploitation.
See,
AJ, I know you were looking to get a word in. Did you have something to say?
Go on, sorry.
Okay, so.
I can't hear him on my end.
I can't hear you. No, I can't hear you. Maybe without the headphones?
It's just that. Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. So what's happening here? I think it's very clear. Ryan and Jordan came to this debate from a utilitarian standpoint, or what they would call threshold deontology. That's basically what it is. This 1 to 2 or 1 to 1,000, that's just what's called threshold deontology. Basically just utilitarianism with extra steps. That's just what it is. It's just a utilitarian, welfarist, reducitarian standpoint, which goes against the vegan principle. So if the name of the proposition was vegans should support this, then no. I mean, you're coming with utilitarian arguments to a vegan, and veganism is a deontic stance against all use of animals. So that's what it is. So it's utilitarian is incompatible. So this feather thing is the same thing. Is you're viewing the animals, their body parts, their secretions as things for you to use as you see fit. As
I
I
just want to
said,
keep making the point that I agree it is a utilitarian argument if we're talking about harming animals for a bigger good, or at least could be a utilitarian argument. Maybe Ryan would still say it has nothing to do with it. But I want to keep driving home this point that only applies to the companies that do have to exploit animals in the whole 1 to 2 argument is harm is being done here, but greater harm is being done here. That's the point of the 1 to 2. Ethical
there's
issues are
veganism.
happening.
yeah,
Pardon?
yeah, but my point is, none of it needs to happen. Not the 1, not the 2, not the 10,000. And we have the things to do it. We just stop doing it. That's it.
I get your point. What I'm saying is you saying that we are making the 1 to 2 argument is an argument of some harm is being caused, but more harm would be caused over here. That doesn't have to apply to this debate because companies can have lab grown meat without any intervention of animals. And so it's not a utilitarian like, oh, but this is the bigger picture. It's actually the point you're making, that it's just the bigger picture. There is no trade-off. There is no, for the companies that do it that way, which I'm sure technology will advance, tenfold over the next 10 years to where no companies have to use animals. But that is what you're talking about, where there's a trade-off of billions of animals that don't need to be exploited. Sorry, that's the outcome. And the trade-off is nothing. The trade-off, what? The trade-off is having animal cells. You've got to make an argument as to why there's a moral issue with that. How can you have a moral issue with something where an animal isn't being harmed or exploited? I would love to know the answer to that.
Yeah, because the animal that you took the cells from didn't consent to that, and it was an exploited animal. It was a slave animal.
I don't know if I don't mean this in a bad way, but I don't know if it's just a language barrier. Let's just, for the sake of this, concentrate on the companies that do it without taking it from cells.
But are you talking about
they do exist? Just one example. Ben and Jerry's have said that they have came up with, and it will hopefully be rolled out in the next 10 years, a completely identical, from a DNA point of view, lab-grown milk that doesn't involve the use of cows at any point. So let's concentrate on that. Do you support that? Because if you don't, it's not a utilitarian like, oh, you don't agree with any harm to save bigger harm. That's a different point. You have to make a point as to why you would still be against Ben and Jerry's, because they've actually said that it could get to the point where they can replace all of their milk with the lab-grown milk. And obviously this isn't an ethical point, it's just an extra point, but they've said that would be great because not only does it address the ethical and environmental issues, but this lab-grown milk that they have developed would also mean that all lactose intolerant children can have their product. I agree, that's a separate point. But why would you have an issue still with that replacement of factory farmed milk into lab grown milk that doesn't use any animals? That would just blow my mind if you're still against that.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hold on, let me just see what's going on with AJ's mic. Speak again, AJ.
Testing.
Okay, yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So no, but are you talking about precision fermentation? Because that's another process altogether. And from my knowledge, the knowledge that I've gathered so far, precision fermentation actually replicates these things without the use of animal cells in the slightest, like no use at all. So it seems like precision fermentation is a better alternative to this other lab-grown meat that you put in a vat and swirls around and whatever it does. I don't know. So if that's what you're talking about, or are you talking about some other process?
I mean, they said it was lab grown milk. I can't tell you. You know, someone could bring up the article. I don't know what the actual process is, but the point, Ryan, your mic is off if you were speaking.
It's likely precision fermentation is what they're getting at.
I mean, precision fermentation, from what I know, I'm fine with it because it doesn't use animals at all and at any point. So I'm not
But then,
against
so you are okay with lab-grown meat companies, because this is my point. If you're against the cells being the same, Ben and Jerry's have said the cells will be identical to that of animal protein for the milk. So if it's the cells you're against, we need to focus on that. But if you're saying it's about the use of animals at all, then by definition, you are in favor of the lab-grown meat companies that don't use animals at all, of which there are many.
Like, it doesn't seem like you guys are tracking that point. We're asking, are you okay with, in these scenarios, option one, you have cultivated meat where it's animal cells, but there's no animal use at all to get there, versus that's what we're asking. Like, is your problem the animal cells, like somebody putting animal cells in their mouth? I assume that's not the problem, as opposed to the animals being used to get there.
But if it is animal cells, then it does come from an animal. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not a mimic or a replication.
No.
Why not?
Animal cells can be made without animal use.
Without a sentient animal being used.
Yeah. Okay.
With no sentient being used.
Explain that to me, because I don't understand how can you get like cells from animals, but not is that.
I mean, the feather example I gave was a good one. Maybe you're okay with that. Vicente, sorry, said he wasn't okay with that. This was a feather from a sanctuary.
Oh, I understand. So yeah,
but there is no sentient animal used,
right?
Because it was an inanimate object in that sense. It's like a dog feces. It's something that has fallen, came from the animal, is no longer connected, and they were able to make like unlimited amount of chicken nuggets from that sanctuary feather. But there are other companies but there are other companies that are doing it in other ways. This was just obviously a marketing thing that they showed, went and got the feather, took it back to the lab. But there's going to be so many examples like that. And Ryan, maybe you can correct me, but I'm sure I have read about companies that have said they can literally get the cells without using animals in any way, whether that's through, I don't know, developing cells until they're the same as animal cells, or whether it comes from fossils. I don't know, but I have read this.
Yeah, to give a little more context, exactly what goes into cultivated meat. There's the cell is what they need to get from the original animal. Mm-hmm. A lot of ways to do that, one of which can be from no sentient being has to be actually used to get it. And then there's and then after that, there's the growth serum, the media. And that we can also replicate now on an infinite cell line, the actual serum itself. So we don't need that anymore. So these same companies, they don't need that anymore. So we're at a stage, maybe like, we're at a stage where that is no longer a necessity. And I guess like we could have talked about, that like threshold, is it worth going for this? But we don't even need to get there, because we haven't even got you guys to the point where no animal used at all. It's just animal cells. It happens to be animal cells, and you guys are still not okay with it. So like,
Can I address the mentality thing? Because I still want to focus that the debate is about if vegans, and I want to project it as the vegan movement should give that message. Sorry if I can give an analogy that is a little bit graphic, so I'm sorry for that. But imagine making lab-grown women, and you don't use the cell. You just pick a hair that you find, and you can replicate all the cells and make these women, not sentient women, but just look like women, different characteristics that you can choose. They move, everything, so that you can please the rapist mentality that they can rape those women, but they are not sentient. So the number of rape of actual women would reduce and all of that. But would you expect the feminist movement to support that, just as and I think that's analogous to saying that the vegan movement should support this idea that animals are food.
Jordan, do you want to take that or shall I?
Yeah, I mean, whether we would expect yeah, please add your thoughts after, but whether we would expect the movement to take something or not is obviously different to whether we think they should. I could obviously understand that, without getting into feminism, there might be all sorts of things in this panel that we believe that feminists spend a lot of time speaking about that we don't think is that much of an issue. So obviously that's a whole point within itself. But would I expect all feminists to get on board with that? No. Would I hope that all feminists would get on board with that if their mission is to reduce the number, either reduce or basically phase it out of existence altogether, the rape of sentient women? Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, like if you told me that you could make women that weren't sentient, so it's just a body package or whatever, and you didn't have to use any actual woman to get that, and this would now reduce the number of actual sentient women being raped, it's like, no shit. Not only, I think,
but at the cost
not to do that, like that would be wrong.
At the cost of pleasing the rapist mentality.
But who cares about the
mentality
if the outcome?
Because that's the root of the problem.
We're just worried about mentality because it's indexed.
We have to treat the disease, not the symptoms.
Like, we're worried about mentality because we're worried that something's going to happen from that mentality. We're saying less, like, women are going to be raped because of this.
Yeah, I don't see how, because then, like, if the mentality doesn't change, the mentality doesn't change, then they will still continue to be raped. It's just like, I don't know, are we going to take blood samples from kids and make lab-grown kids' genitals for child molesters? Like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. So I don't know. It's always like it's so easy, it seems, for humans to make these decisions about animals, because animals, we don't consider them as much. So we make these decisions. Hey, we're just going to take a blood sample from you and take it from there and stuff like that, without their consent, without their agreeing to anything. And it's impermissible, and this feather thing and this stuff, it's just more utilitarian arguments, and this reducing suffering and stuff. That's not what veganism is. And I know that you're trying to make the argument that, well, this might not even need to be a vegan thing, maybe it's another thing parallel to veganism that's also good or beneficial, but I don't see it. The only thing that's good is to just stop using animals, and I think we have all the resources to do that. We don't need any technology for it. So I don't know. It's just education that we need. We don't need any savior chunk of meat out there, because okay, are we going to grow lab-grown horses for racing, lab-grown bulls for bullfighting? Like, how does that solve all other instances of animal oppression? It doesn't.
Are they robots or are they sentient? Because if they're robots, then I'm sure we're all ethically okay with robots. If they're sentient, then obviously that's not the same as lab-grown. Like, if you've made a lab-grown horse that is sentient and still exploited for racing, then you haven't created anything different to the horse. So again, that's a bad example in all due respect.
No, it's not about example.
If we can make a robot horse,
I'm not saying that we can make it. I'm saying is, how does lab-grown meat solve horse racing, camel riding in the Cairo and stuff like that? Like, how does that solve any of that? So you're saying, it will reduce victims and stuff. How does it reduce for the victims that are still there? And how does it reduce anything? There's so many instances of animal oppression out there, and this only solves a dietary issue.
I think a lot of nirvana fallacy has been used here, to be honest, because it's like saying, if we can end black slavery, how does that help kids who are being trafficked in Mexico for drugs? Like, they can be two, like, that you can say that the mentality that unites all of them is our view that humans who are weaker than us can be oppressed, sure, but except from that, they're completely different issues. And so we might tackle black slavery in America in a different way to tackling child drug cartels in Mexico. Like, they don't need to fix each other. And I think this is actually quite telling to what you said earlier of like, the Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger hasn't ended animal exploitation. Therefore, like, what's the use in it? I mean, if something can help something 1% for the victim, which I know everyone on this panel agrees with, 1% is always going to be better. Not that we're looking at 1% at all. And I actually, unless anyone has anything else to say, I actually want to move this to food and people's desire for meat, because again, I think it's very telling when you guys say, but we already have the answer. And that I wrote down that you said, oh, where did it go? Basically that plant-based products isn't what veganism is about. I agree that's not what veganism is about, but actually what people eat is probably the number one cause that's stopping them being vegan. Like, I don't know what the results for this would show, but it's certainly what I can promise everyone is that the reason people eat meat is not because they want to abuse animals. If anything, it's the other way around, that they either are completely against the abuse of animals, but that meat tastes so good or it's convenient, or that they had no idea that this was going on. People aren't turning vegan because they love the taste of pasta, fruit, and vegetables so much. Like, sorry, let me rephrase that point. That is what I'm saying, but there needs to be good enough products to justify that. Like, what is the number one reason when you talk to people about veganism? They don't say, oh yeah, I love the food, but my desire to keep killing animals is what keeps me eating meat. Like, people only eat meat because it tastes great. And whilst you guys might not see a vegan that goes back to eating meat is a real vegan in the first place, I think that actually proves the point I'm trying to drive home even more, that even vegans who have been convinced by the moral arguments of veganism end up some going back to eating the products because convenience, taste, and all the rest. And so I think we're really missing out this point. And if you want any stats that back this up, a study in America showed that 67. So this is what I mean when we're not talking 1%, even though if we were, I would still be arguing this side. But 67% of American meat eaters said they would eat lab-grown meat. Now, we all know that it's not 67% would go vegan, because if they would, we would see either all or at least the majority of that 67% be vegan. So clearly they care about animals, but they don't care about animals enough to give up meat, dairy, and eggs. So if lab-grown meat what's the percentage of American vegans? 3% at the most. So let's say half of that 67% are bluffing. I don't know why they would. I would actually make the argument it would be higher than 67%, because 67% are saying yes right now when it's not a popular thing. But once it's in stores and everyone else is eating it and people learn more about the ethical issues of animal farming, I think that would be higher. But for the sake of this point, let's say half are bluffing and only half would actually follow through. Okay, well, half of 67% is 33.5%. That is already 10 times higher, 1,000% higher than the number of vegans we have in America. And so that's why I keep getting back to this point of it depends whether you care about the principles or you care about actual outcomes. Now, to me, any vegan that puts principles before the actual outcome of reducing or eliminating animal suffering or exploitation, because it's both, and we can just focus on exploitation if you want. It doesn't need to be a utilitarian, suffering is the main point. Like, we can purely play this debate on your guys' rules of companies that don't use animals at all, and purely your definition of veganism, which is about exploitation, even if there's no suffering. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But there's other people that have come up with other definitions. So I'm saying the definition you agree with, and the original, I'm happy with that too. The original definition of veganism, we would still be making the point that our side and the vote for innovation of lab-grown meat can end or at least greatly reduce the exploitation. And how do the figures of 67% not back up that claim?
Yeah, we can run this conversation purely deontological.
Yeah, but I mean, why are you so optimistic of people preferring lab-grown meat without changing their minds? I think you would have a point if we wouldn't provide an alternative. But I think that people really underestimate the power of individual change, especially at this stage. Let me give you an example just to illustrate my point. If suppose, I don't know, do you think it's fair to say that 1% of the world is vegan? Maybe, let's say 1%.
Sure.
Okay, so that's we are 8 billion, so that will make 80 million vegans, something like that. Okay, so imagine if we propose only that each vegan just convince one person per year to go vegan, just one. Then each year the number of vegans will duplicate, so we'll have 80 billions, 160, and so on and so on. And if you do the calculations, in less than 10 years, you can have a vegan world. Of course, it's a simplified model, but my point is that we shouldn't underestimate individual change. And I don't say that we only can go to institutional change when we are 100% vegan. No, I think that it's enough if we are a critical mass. I don't know, 20-25% maybe. I don't know. This is much a sociological issue, but we need more vegans in the first place. We won't get anywhere if we don't have more vegans.
I don't think we're disagreeing. Everything you just said about getting more vegans convincing people one-on-one, that has nothing to do with whether or not vegans should also support lab-grown meat.
No, but my point is that there is a third option, and I think it has something to do, because if we have to promote veganism, we can't do that and at the same time promote lab-grown meat. And the point of this debate, I remind you, is whether vegans should support it. It may have better outcomes if it happens, but as a movement, we need to have a clear message. And I'm not talking about moral purity here. I'm talking about reaching our goal, which is the end of animal exploitation, without normalizing.
We're on about reaching that goal as well, and which one could get there faster and
less than 10 years.
And I think it's interesting, actually. I don't know if you would actually argue to get to a vegan world slower if it was on your moral grounds than faster using lab-grown meat, because I think that would be quite problematic if you would. But I think the irony of you saying that vegans could go out and get more vegans and we can do it that way, that's quite ironic, because whilst we can do that, if the percentage of vegans is 1% and the percentage of meat eaters that would consume lab-grown meat, at least in America, is 67%, then we could achieve that even quicker if that 67% were going out and getting an extra person to switch to lab-grown meat. So I don't see that
they are not, because they are not vegans then.
But that doesn't matter. The definition doesn't matter to animals, whether we call it vegans or clowns. It doesn't matter.
But I remind you, the topic of this debate is whether vegans should support it. The vegan movement.
But it's not whether you would still be vegan if you support it. So it doesn't matter if that 67% of meat eaters, with the help of vegans or not, are going out and getting that 1% and increasing, because wouldn't that bring us to the world of zero or minimal animal exploitation much quicker? You've got to agree that there are more meat eaters that would eat lab-grown meat than there are number of vegans. You have to agree with that, unless you don't.
But the point is that we have to change that.
You think there's less than 1% of meat eaters that would eat lab-grown meat?
I don't think there's lab. I mean, here's the thing. There's no market for lab-grown meat in the meat-eating people's world.
That's just not true.
They might
it's
try
just empirically not true. We have data on that.
No. They might try it at some. Like I said, yeah, sure. At first, it comes out, and some people try it out of curiosity. They have these.
But you're on about the Beyond Burger and the Impossible Burger. That's different.
Celebrity tie-ins and stuff like that. It's gonna be the same playbook. It's gonna be the same thing that happened with the plant-based stuff. Thing.
But not if we all support it.
But why would we support it? It's not a vegan. No.
Can I share my
support it?
I'm going to share my screen to show something. So you guys should be able to see this chart now. Do you guys see it's got blue, yellow, gray?
We can't see it, Ryan.
don't see
I
it.
can't see it.
Have you clicked present at the bottom of the screen?
I have, yeah.
Okay, hold on. I see what's happening. Right, I've got to add your. Okay, one sec. Okay,
Sweet.
there we go.
Yeah. So this is from the Good Food Institute. So we can see that there's an educational aspect. So once people, that's not that difficult to do. Eventually, once it's it would be on the market and reaches price parity. But like you can see before and after the education, it goes from somewhat to moderately supportive, which would be in the camp of trying it, to extremely supportive, which wants to eat it right now. There's even a percent of people where we can see where actually they would eat cultivated meat, even if it costs more, very small percent, but it's 4%. That's 4 times higher than the vegan population would be willing to eat cultivated meat, even if it costs more. So, like it seems that I just want to get that statistic pulled up, so it doesn't show that I'm just making it up. Yeah, like as you can see down here, pay a higher price for cultivated meat than conventional meat. Like 4% would even pay more. So the point I'm getting at is like to say that we think that cultivated meat, people aren't going to eat cultivated meat, like there's zero market for it, it's just empirically not true. Like unless you have some other data that would like go against this or something like that. Like I just don't argument.
What guarantees us that it will happen in the long run? Because AJ said that it will have a boom because people will, I think that people will try it, they will find it interesting, but is it a sustainable thing? And we're also appealing to the taste. Are we really? Does animal liberation depends on whether people like the taste and texture of something?
I think
we're appealing.
I think it's a very weak. Yeah, but I don't think that plant-based product. I think that they are just there, as AJ said before. It's like, yeah, they're there. It's okay to eat it, but that doesn't get us to veganism. We have a limited amount of time and resources. I think the most effective way, because I insist, this is not only a matter of moral purity. I think it's much more efficient to change people's minds. Because it has projection to be sustained. People that change their mind, they become vegan and they never come back.
I just think it's so interesting you're bringing time into this, because if anyone on this planet thinks someone is more likely to go vegan, only eating vegetables, fruits, and pastas, than they are being able to eat real burgers, kebab, fish and chips that don't use animals, I think that is naivety on such a grand
I didn't say that
level.
I didn't imply that. I said that.
No, but what I'm saying is you're mentioning
power.
time.
It has more power.
Which one is going to get people to step away from animal farming quicker? Amazing, healthy fruits and vegetables, yeah, great. Or hamburgers, kebabs, fish and chips, KFC using lab-grown meat. So time is our argument, or at least my argument.
I think one person becoming vegan has much more transformative power than 100 people eating lab-grown meat. It's just a very unstable thing. It's like, we eat lab-grown meat, but I don't see them
I think
being
that's such
really
a good example of
a power of change.
I think that's such a good example of like where ideology and dogma can become so entrenched in people.
No. I'm talking about practicality, because
vegans, but you said one vegan is better than 100 people eating lab-grown meat.
I didn't say it's better in a moral way. I said it has more transformative power. I'm speaking in practical terms, because this is obvious, but every vegan is an ex-non-vegan. So we will each new vegan is also strengthening the vegan paradigm and weakening the current paradigm, and that's where the strengthening is. And
so how far do you take that?
It's a snowball effect, because we want to normalize the vegan message. It will be difficult at the first stage, but once we reach a higher mass, then we want to normalize veganism. That's my point.
So is one person powerful than the whole world eating lab-grown meat? Can I just ask that?
Well, what was the question?
That's a hypothetical that probably won't happen anytime in the next 10 years. But do you still use that principle for one vegan if the whole world was consuming only lab-grown meat? You still think that's more powerful and more worthwhile our time pursuing?
I couldn't say in practical terms, but essentially my point is that educational power is far more transformative, because it's not.
I don't
Because
think our
it's
side
just not
misses
realistic
out
to say that
education.
one vegan versus the whole world eating lab-grown meat. I don't. That's not a fair comparison.
When you say I still think education is more transformative, that's making out our side doesn't care about that. We might be and probably are of the position that we should educate people as to why animal farming is unethical, but give
why animal
option
exploitation is not only animal farming, animal exploitation
well,
in general.
I'm on
animal
about farming
use.
just because
Animal
of
use.
lab grown, but okay, cool. Animal exploitation is unethical, and still educate people to either eat Beyond Burgers or lab grown burgers. Like, education doesn't need to be missing from our system. In fact, it wouldn't be.
I agree that there's an important part of giving practical help, especially when people already accept the vegan principle. It's good to, vegan recipes and all of that has a place in the movement. I'm not denying that, but I think that lab grown meat doesn't belong to that.
No, sorry, that isn't what I meant. I didn't mean of the plant-based products. I meant when you were saying one vegan versus like 100 or 1,000 people eating lab-grown meat. You still, the reason you think that's more powerful, you said because you still believe education should be like at the root and the core thing. What I'm saying is we might be pro lab-grown meat, but still be just as pro education as you are. We still want to teach people just as much. Almost done. Sorry, we still want to teach people just as much why the education of animal exploitation is wrong. We're simply saying that we're okay with lab-grown meat as a solution to that, like you are okay with a Beyond Burger as a solution to that. So it still doesn't. The arguments that are being given still doesn't provide a good reason as to why vegans should have any kind of ethical ethical objection to lab-grown meat.
Like we've said from the beginning, it uses animals, so that's it. It directly uses it. No, but there are, like you've said, that there are some that already don't use them or whatever, but they use them. I mean, they still use them at some point. Like they took from the animal anyway. So there's no the precision fermentation. That's another process altogether.
There are companies that can do it without taking from the animal.
But there's another issue, because I've seen like good meat. Yeah, good meat, and there's another one that's called for fauna, and other companies and organizations, and they all say the same thing in the About Us section. They all say lab-grown meat is real meat from cells grown from an animal, and they tell you that they're working in conjunction with animal farming to reduce this suffering and thing, and attack the factory farming stuff, but not the traditional farming and whatnot. So it's this same reducitarian thing, and you're coming with this fallacy, the futility fallacy, that veganism alone cannot do this, and like we need this thing because this will be the tool that will help us achieve this sooner, and stuff like that. It's just an appeal to futility that veganism cannot achieve this. And the reason why people and the reason why I say this will be another failure is because people, they say stuff. They say, I mean, you've done outreach, I guess, and you've done these things. You've talked to people. We've all talked to animal abusers, meat eaters at large, and they all say whatever excuse. But the real issue why they still eat meat, or they still ride horses, or they still do this or that, is because their mentality, they view the animal as less than, and they view them as something rather than someone. So it doesn't solve anything. You're making an appeal to a fantasy of a 67% figure, or 78%, or whatever percentage, that they're willing to try this lab-grown stuff, but it won't solve anything. They still think that animals are things to be consumed. And if I, as a vegan, how can I, as a vegan, say to someone else, "Oh, you eat meat? Okay, eat this meat instead. This one is good." And they're telling me, "Oh, are you eating this meat?" No, I'm not, because I'm vegan. I'm above these things. So
That's
would
exactly
be more
what
of a
meat eaters-
self-purity.
Yeah,
Can
but
I
that's
ask you two
actually-
things?
Yeah, go on.
okay.
Real quick. I think this is going to make her sort of break the debate right here is one. I'll try to say this as carefully as I can. Do we think there's any evidence that eating lab-grown meat reinforces the belief more that we should be eating animals more than the people currently eating animals? And two, would we rather have people have the belief that animals are things, but not have animals killed, or animals killed, but they still believe they're things? And back to point one, we're not even convinced that people are still going to think that they're things when they're eating lab-grown meat.
They will not become vegans because of that, and that is at least they will. Is ineffective in that in attacking the root of the problem. And the second point, sorry, let me.
Yeah. Do you need me to repeat it?
What's the second point? Sorry,
Would you rather have people still view animals as things, but there not being any animals killed? I'll just say, let's just say hypothetically, no animals killed. No animals killed.
Again, false dichotomy. False dichotomy. There's a third option. Because,
no, I'm saying in those two options.
But those aren't the two options. Okay, I think that it's better if people think that animals are things, but no animals are exploited in the process. But that I don't think that is a sustainable approach. It's very weak. It's very subject to people liking it. What happens if then animal exploited from the traditional way of making meat or whatever animal product came with a more delicious way of doing it? It's like, are we really depending on the taste and the texture of the people? And also, there's a third option, which is changing people's mentality so that exploitation doesn't happen in a sustainable manner.
That can also that's also not
that is the third option.
That's not baked into the cake.
That's not what, sorry?
Sorry, I cut you off. I shouldn't have. Continue.
No. I made my point.
That's not necessarily has to be excluded. I gave you the hypothetical with option A and B, and then you're saying we can do option C. I'm like, well, then I can also bring an option C. We can also do the education, teach people animals are not things. I already do that. We already do that. But I'm just trying to get to the core of your values here, because at some point, if we're not getting to an agreement, our values, and we're on the same page for the facts and the logic, our values are what's different. And I think it's becoming clear that that's
no, in the dichotomy, yes. In the dichotomy, yes. But that's why I have insisted so much in this debate that there's a third solution. But I also think I wouldn't have a problem if I thought that it didn't have the reverse effect. I think it's incompatible to promote this change of mindset whilst promoting lab-grown meat.
Can I just say, I think there's a real big, and I'm not saying it's deliberate at all, but mischaracterization of our position, because every time you say that, lab-grown meat could be bad or is bad because it doesn't address the issue, and therefore when a farmer comes out and potentially makes an even nicer product, they could go back, is making it seem like our position, like I said before, is void of education. And therefore, it makes it seem like we are saying, forget vegan activism. No, just 1 second. It is, and I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because otherwise, there's no point mentioning the point of, but they could just go back to eating meat, and it isn't addressing the point, because we can address the point, but give this as a solution. I think we should, just for the sake of this, I think we should differentiate between the reason people should not, and again, we're on about eating, we can speak about buying fur and leather, but for the point of this, we're on about food. This is about lab-grown meat. So we need to differentiate between the ethical issues of eating from animal farming and what people are going to eat instead. They're two completely separate things, because people could starve themselves to death, they could eat soil, they could eat beyond on meat. It's a different point. And so by you saying it doesn't address the issue is making it seem like there isn't education or addressing of that issue within lab-grown meat, which just isn't true. Now, if we were saying, forget about vegan education, here is some lab-grown meat, I 100% agree with you that the issue with that position is that a load of people might start eating it. This is really tasty. But then their friend is saying, yeah, but you can get it cheaper from Burger King the non-lab grown meat. So they haven't got the conviction as to why they should abstain from animal farming. We can teach people why you should abstain from animal farming. Then it becomes, what are they going to eat instead? And that's where I can't speak for Ryan, but I am making the argument that you can tell people you can eat pasta, fruit, and vegetables. You can also tell people that you can eat, once it's readily available, lab-grown kebabs, KFC, all the rest. The irony is that one is actually going to, because we do have vegans who eat pasta, fruit, and vegetables, who go back on their convictions because they love the taste of meat so much. So we already have that. Actually, it's actually quite a big problem, depending on what source you look at. But forgetting that point, let me just remember my point. Forgetting that point, if we're giving people, even if we're just giving people a second option, like here's a Beyond Burger, but there's also an Impossible Burger, that's already given them more choice of like, oh, okay, I can eat really tasty food without funding animal exploitation. But now if we're adding a third option of you can actually eat the food that you have loved your entire life, and us as vegans even admit we loved meat, we loved kebabs, we loved KFC. If a person can have them same products but without any of the things that we all agree is wrong, i.e. animal farming, then that's like the best solution we could have. And it doesn't mean that there's this education. It doesn't mean, oh, without the foundations of knowing where it's wrong, it all falls apart, because we agree with that. Teach people why animal farming is wrong. And then we are saying have lab-grown meat in the mix as well. But I'm actually arguing that that's a much more convincible option than fruit and vegetables is going to be any day. Because we don't live in a world where people crave, unfortunately, fruit and vegetables. They do crave, and they will tell you that the one reason they're not vegan is because they couldn't give up meat. They couldn't give up cheese. That's why we have plant-based versions that try and get as close to them as possible.
And it's not just our intuition.
No.
The data supports this as well. All the data we have available shows this.
I'm sorry, can you hear me well? Because I was gone for a little while. Do you hear me well now? Because okay, yeah, but that doesn't make people vegan, and that's the key point. Because the fact that people eat vegan cheese doesn't mean that they only eat vegan cheese and all the vegan options. It's just another alternative. But if we don't change their mindset, it's just another option on the market. And I'm
right.
So and I want to address something that you said in the beginning. I didn't imply. Sorry if it looked that way, that you reject vegan education. I just said that I think that people usually underestimate it. Not that you are discarding it, but I think that before I mentioned that, for example, if you go to rescue an animal from a farm, you are not addressing the core problem, but it's fine, because I think it doesn't go against the problem of the mindset of thinking about animals as commodities. But I think that promoting lab-grown meat and veganism is contradicting because of that. That was my point. Not that you rejected vegan education.
It can't possibly be contradictory, because when we turn vegan and we show people what's happening to animals, we are not saying and eating and putting an animal the DNA of an animal cell in your mouth is the problem. We all say it's the exploitation of animals. So how could there possibly be a contradiction if we have made meat without the exploitation of animals?
Because I said that exploitation begins in the mentality that animals are commodities. In the how do you say in English? Commodification, maybe? That's the problem.
The commodification.
And that's starting the mentality.
That might be one like tree of like this has led to that. But that doesn't, just because A is led to B doesn't mean B links to C as well. Like if slavery is an issue, but then we change the laws that people can have jobs. So it's kind of the same thing, a person going out and picking, cotton for someone else. It's actually the same thing. But the difference is the moral point of being forced to do that, or being given a consenting, like well-paid job. Action is the same, but the oppression is different. So how can that not apply to meat from a farm and meat without an animal being involved? Just because it's still meat, and you're saying this mentality comes from here. Okay, well, the mentality of like people at that time buying a shitloads of cotton clearly came from the mentality that slavery is okay too. Cool. But that doesn't mean any buying of cotton is also problematic for that reason. And the same applies here.
I see your point, but it's a matter of context. If we were in a really vegan world, everyone vegan, then maybe you will have a point. I doubt it. I don't know. I will have to think about it.
Are you okay with lab-grown meat?
No. I want to say that, but your point about the not necessarily implying that it goes against the mindset. Not sure about it, but I said it. My point about the reinforcing the mindset is because it's especially present in the current context. Because 1% of the population, I don't know, is vegan. So, or even less.
And that's why it's even more important that we push lab-grown meat to get more of that 99% onto eating it. Like I said, I think it's undeniable.
We're playing with.
I don't think you presented any reasons why, because people might go back to eating real meat, as in meat from an animal, but that applies in lab-grown meat. But I would argue it would apply more so because if someone's having, let's face it, you know, there's always that joke of vegan cheese. It's not that great. What is someone more likely to go back to eating real cheese? If they're having lab-grown cheese that tastes exactly the same, or they're having a plant-based cheese that's only like 70% there, which one is going to make them more likely to go back, considering that the education is the same? They've both been educated on why the dairy industry is awful. Please be honest with this. Which one do you think is going to be more likely to go back to buy in real cheese? Or
no.
You will more likely eat the lab-grown cheese. But my point is that you said that keeping education the same, but I think that the in terms of education, the message is weakened when we add this lab-grown meat and all of that.
It doesn't have to be weakened though.
Like you said, there was a contradiction. What's the proposition and its negation, like being like what's being contradicted? I'm just not clear on that.
Okay, the focus. Okay, I argue that the focus of the vegan movement should be to tackle the mindset, and I think that the contradiction is that when we propose lab-grown meat, especially in this context, we reinforce that mindset. At the same time,
the debate proposition is not vegans should have the majority or plurality of their focus on lab-grown meat. It's just vegans should support it. That doesn't mean education has to be the number one thing. So I don't think that's a contradiction.
I think they contradict, because even if 99% of your activism is vegan education, then that 1% will be contradicting. Maybe it would the vegan message would far outweigh the effect, but I mean that is in itself a contradiction. At least in terms that we want, that I think we should tackle the mindset.
But if the mindset is exploiting animals, how is there possibly a contradiction in the mindset if someone is eating meat without exploitation of animals?
The mindset is that animals are commodities or animals are food. As I told you before, there's a reason why we don't propose human lab-grown meat. Well, or maybe they will. I don't know.
There's nothing wrong with that either, but in my opinion, but. Ryan, were you going to say something? Sorry.
If human consents, maybe not, but well, I see an issue there.
No, but if animals don't consent, but there's no animals involved, do they need to consent? Like, does someone need to consent? If a bit of skin, to the feather point I was making, falls from your hand, and someone finds that outside and creates human tissue from it, do you need to consent to that?
No, but there's also the problem of context that I told you before.
That's the same context.
No, we just gave you the context.
Yeah. Because you did say, just to be clear, you are still against that feather being used. So I'm saying
in a non-vegan context, especially in a non-vegan context, I think that is playing with fire.
So I'm just saying, when you said about humans being involved, you said yes if consent was involved, but then I asked you if a bit of skin fell off you and someone found that skin and created human tissue from it. Now, it actually doesn't matter what they're going to do with it. If they're going to sniff it to get high or eat it or just put it on their wall, we all agree that doesn't matter, but you don't need to consent. You've just admitted to that being used. So why? Oh, you do?
No, I think it shouldn't be used.
So
Well,
you do
okay,
think
that was
okay.
That was a tangent point. My main point was that in terms of context, especially, it is very crucial to tackle the mindset. That was really my main point.
I was just on about the consent. And
yeah, we can agree with that. I just don't. That's just not a contradiction. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jordan.
In terms of context, I think it is. Sorry.
No one cut me off. Yeah, I can't. Obviously, I guess the point of this debate is for people listening, and I mean, I would also challenge that veganism is about the mindset of how we view animals. The mindset of how we view animals might cause the issues that we're against as vegans, but I don't think it starts with that the mindset is wrong, because like Ryan was getting to, if we all had the mindset that animals were property, but no one acted on that, then there wouldn't be a moral emergency for us to tackle. There wouldn't be a vegan movement. Like, I don't care. And I don't think most people would care what people think as long as they don't act on them. Now, I do agree that thoughts matter because thoughts lead to actions. But the point is, and by the way, the point is that people would care in a world with lab-grown meat because we would still be trying to educate them. But even if that wasn't the point, your point is that you're against lab-grown meat because veganism is about the mindset of how we view animals. But I think most vegans would think that veganism is about the exploitation and the abuse of animals.
I said
that might come from the mindset.
If I can ask you this,
should be about the mindset.
Like, real quick, if you have people who are not yet, they don't have the vegan mentality yet, but they're eating lab-grown meat on the usual, do you think it's going to be easier to convince them about the morality of veganism to get on the same mindset, or if they're still eating actual chickens that were sentient? Which one of those do you think is going to be easier? Because I guess I can be convinced that they're neutral, but it's certainly, I can't possibly say that would be more difficult.
But so it will mean that you're. If I'm wrong, if I'm misrepresenting you, you are saying that maybe we should think about lab-grown meat as a middle step to make the message at the end.
Not quite. I'm saying if lab-grown meat is a reality,
not just wait. No, but not just wait. Yeah, but we are discussing if we should endorse it as a movement. My point is that we should go straight to veganism. I don't think we need that middle step, and I don't think so.
Okay, no, yeah, but I believe, Ryan, your question was who was more difficult to convince to go vegan, like a lab-grown meat eater or an actual animal eater? Was that the question?
Yeah.
I think it would be more difficult to convince the lab-grown meat eater because they would already feel like they're doing enough. It's the same thing with vegetarians, reducitarians, flexitarians, all these tarians, that they already feel, but I'm already doing enough. I'm already doing this. And you told me yesterday that this lab-grown meat was a better alternative. So now you're telling me to go eat lentils? Like, what is this? So what message are we really telling them? And I'm thinking that a person who eats actual animals is going to be easier to convince than a person who's already thinking that they're reducing something. You see, that's the problem. They already feel like they're doing enough. So why am I doing this other thing if I'm already doing it? Like, I'm saving the planet and I'm saving these animals, and I'm doing this also improving my health or whatever, because this meat is cleaner than the other one from factory farming and stuff like that. So why should I give up this awesome taste for some chickpeas that I don't even like? So I think that's the thing. But I'm going to say this, and this might be just my anecdotal evidence or whatever, but when I went vegan, I just went vegan from a completely meat-eating person and animal-abusing person, whatever, to veganism. And my favorite thing to eat in the world was a pepperoni pizza. And today, I just absolutely hate it. I wish it never existed. So I don't know, the chances of me going back to eating that is absolutely zero. So I don't get it.
obviously that is anecdotal, and that's
Sure,
more a point of whether you would eat lab-grown meat yourself, which is different. I would say myself and every vegan I know would have gone vegan. Again, you don't see them as vegan. That's why I'm making this distinction between those that eat meat from animal farming and those that don't. Every vegan I know would have gave up real meat quicker if they could have lab-grown meat, because then there's no trade-off. Like you're trying to get people to give up them products because of the ethical implications, and you're offering a solution of pasta, fruit and vegetables, and Beyond Burgers. Of course, I think you guys even conceded the fact that they might be more likely to change if they could have lab-grown meat, but that you wouldn't necessarily care about that because they wouldn't be vegan, or at least you did.
what? No, well, I
Vicente.
didn't concede to that.
Yeah,
No.
you might have not, but I think Vicente did say that he could see how someone would be more likely to give it up, but then they wouldn't be vegan, and that's the main point.
No, I said I couldn't tell, but even if it were the case, I don't see the point of going. I think it's too much to get to that middle step in the first way. But I think AJ made a very good point, because that's the same that happened with welfareism. Is this confused message, and then people think they are doing the right thing by buying cage-free eggs and all of that. I think the biggest obstacle of the vegan movement is not this anti-vegan, really explicit, I don't know, apex predator people that think that they are apex predator and all of that. I think that the biggest obstacle is welfareism, because is in my view the false notion that people that there's a right way to exploit animals.
Okay, and this lab-grown meat can have zero exploitation of animals. So it's not, as I've already pointed out, the welfare. Whilst you're trying to say, oh, this is welfareist because it's this middle ground type thing, that's really the only kind of commonality you can make, because we would all agree the issue with welfareism is that animals are still can be both, but either going to be exploited or be abused as well, or both. But the point of the argument we're making about lab-grown meat isn't this argument, as we've kept saying, of like, oh, well, at least it's better, at least there's less abuse. It can be done without any exploitation. And therefore, you still need to make an argument as to why, when there's no exploitation involved, there is still a moral bad that is occurring, and that just hasn't been presented. You can make the argument as to why welfareism still has ethical issues, but I haven't heard an argument, except from, oh, without the education, people might go back to eating farmed meat. But that exists. Like if someone sees a 10-second video right now and goes vegan because of it, they're also just as likely to, when they're drunk, buy a burger from McDonald's, because they haven't got that like grounded moral principle of why animal farming or animal exploitation is wrong. So it exists in both worlds.
All right, guys. What I'll do now, because I think we've debated for around 2 hours, I'll let AJ or Vicente just respond maybe to Jordan's point there if they want to. And then we'll do the closing statements. So AJ or Vicente, did you want to respond to Jordan's point there, or did you want to just factor that into a closing statement?
It's like a general closing statement, or just to what Jordan said?
Well, what I'm asking you is, did you want to reply there to just what Jordan said, or did you want to just head straight to the closing statements? And if you want, you can even include what Jordan said just then in your closing statement. I'm just asking if you would rather to reply to that quickly first. It's up to you.
No, I think I just pointed out the commonality between welfareism and the lab-grown meat in terms of the lab-grown meat in the case of not using animal cells, supposedly, and all of that. In that case, I address the similarities with welfareism in terms of the mentality, of the mindset. And that's, I think, is a problem. And that's where exploitation begins, really. Because, impractical, because before, I think Ryan said that, I'm not sure, if everyone thought that animals were property, but they still don't exploit it, I think that's a very unstable line. I think, as you said before, Jordan, mindsets translate into action. So I think it's so crucial to change the mindset that I wouldn't play with this fire called lab-grown meat.
All right. Yeah, we'll end the debate there. Thank you, everyone, so much for participating. I thought it was a really good and respectful debate. What we'll do now then is just have some brief closing statements from each of you. This doesn't have to be a pre-written statement or anything. This is just improvising straight off the dome, going with the flow from what you guys have discussed today. Keep it fairly briefish. It only needs to be, maximum 3 minutes or something like that. So if you each want to make a summarizing statement, we'll start with Ryan. If you just want to make a brief closing statement, Ryan. Is Ryan frozen? I think he's frozen.
Yeah.
Right. Let me kick him from the studio and then bring him back in. Okay, Ryan will have to come back in. Okay, Jordan, we'll start with you. Jordan, can you just make a closing statement?
Yeah. Well, should we try and get Ryan back in just in case he wanted to say something different to the points I was going to make in my closing statement?
Better now.
Yeah, he's back.
Hey.
Ryan?
Okay.
Hopefully that won't happen again.
Cool.
Like I think it's reasonable. Our goal here is to get the number of animals, sentient beings, going through this unthinkable as close to zero as possible. I don't care about creating new vegans for the sake of new vegans. I care about and changing people's mindset for the sake of changing their mindset. I care if only that's instrumental to reducing and getting as close as possible to zero the number of animals killed. And the data that we went over today, I didn't get any data on the other side or any of the intuitions brought up the other side, any data to go against the fact that people are willing to try this much more than people are willing to go vegan. And that's going to reduce the number of animals killed. I don't see any reason to believe that the mindset can't also change at the same time. I'm doing that in my own personal life. You guys are doing that in your personal lives. I'd be happy to do a cube with you one time if we ever met up on both sides. But the point I'm getting at is all these things, all these deontic things that you guys care about, changing the mindset, no exploitation, all these things. Every individual animal's rights being exploited, the deontic weight of that is getting reduced to as close as possible to zero with these innovations. And you're just comparing the deontic weights of these things. It's just sort of unimaginable. So I guess I still remain convinced that vegans ought to support this. And yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Vicente, we'll come to you, and then Jordan, I'll come back to you after. So Vicente, if you'd like to make a closing statement.
Okay, yeah, I think that vegan education is not about moral purity and the vegan principle. I think the vegan goal is well established and it's about animal exploitation. It's not that numbers don't matter, but numbers should be at the cost of animal exploitation. So you want to reduce suffering or all of that, it shouldn't be by proposing special institutionalized form of animal exploitation, or at least reinforcing the mindset that animals are commodities for human use. And I want to stretch the power of vegan education by itself. It shouldn't need any of these things to tackle the root of the problem. I think it's important to care about the mentality, because it's really that the origin of the exploitation. It's impractical to do otherwise, because it would mean that we should solve every form of animal exploitation conceivable without just pleasing people without challenging their minds. I think it's far more practical, not only moral. I really want to emphasize that vegan education has a transformative power in the individual level. It will change the paradigm, and we shouldn't the voice. We really should see this as in terms of a movement with projection. We should have a very clear message that veganism is a moral obligation, because animals are not commodities. So we have to really end animal exploitation. Those are my main points.
Thank you, Vicente. Jordan, if you'd like to make your closing statement, please.
I agree that mindset is really important. Mindset leads to actions. And in both cases, mindset is important. And without it, people could go back to buying meat from animal farming. But lab-grown meat gives people another option, and an option that actually causes a lot more people to give up traditional meat because they can literally have their vegan cake and eat it, which from a psychology point of view is always going to be more persuasive for people, whether the other side likes that or not. The other side said that if vegans ate lab-grown meat, they wouldn't be vegan. But that's why we should support this and step away from definitions of words and look at actions. Whether something is vegan or not is not the issue, because that's a human issue. Whether something has a moral good in the world and an effective change is what we should look at. The other side even said that they wouldn't support a world without animal agriculture, even if that meant using a feather that had fallen on the floor. Now, that, in my opinion, is the biggest example of putting principles and dogma over the actual victims of a moral emergency that I could possibly come up with if I had to write one out. The reality is, where we're at right now, veganism can only go so far. Yes, we can try harder. Yes, we can try harder in our ways. But for the most part, people don't not go vegan because they want to harm animals. It's because they love meat, cheese, and eggs so much. And therefore, lab-grown meat gets us to a world where animals aren't being exploited much, much quicker. And the data seems to suggest this. And like Ryan said, there hasn't seemed to be any data that would show that that would slow us down. And therefore, vegans should absolutely support lab-grown meat, because by not doing so, inadvertently is supporting our current system and our current limitations of why people won't go vegan, even if they don't intend to do that.
Thank you, Jordan. And AJ, if you'd like to make your closing statement.
I mean, sure, I remain totally unconvinced of this lab-grown meat being a solution, either in short term or middle term or long term. It's just not. Like I said, it's just perpetuating the status of animals as commodities, perpetuates their exploitation. And yeah, sure, what you presented here is mostly wishful thinking with sure, some surveys that say that X percentage of people are willing to try this thing, but at the end of the day, we've seen it play out with the plant-based alternatives. Those were supposed to be the great savior, and they weren't. So it will happen the same with the lab-grown meat. It will just be the same case. People will continue to make the same excuses that it doesn't taste the same, or it's weird, or it's not natural, or it's whatever, or it's Bill Gates with a secret agenda. And they'll make whatever conspiracy theory they want. So they're not gonna try it. I mean, they might try it for some time and then just leave it at that. And we cannot depend on this thing or say that this thing will be a savior, because what happens then if this lab-grown meat, I don't know, for some unforeseeable thing, ceases to exist because of some reason? Then what do we have? Do we have a world where people will go back to exploiting those same animals that we were not exploiting in theory? So it might sound good in theory to say, but to me it's just a wishful thinking thing with an appeal to futility about veganism. And to me it's more of this purity thing. Is more, if you say to someone, yeah, I'm vegan, but you don't have to be, eat this other meat instead, then what I'm saying is that I'm pure, I'm better than you, I know you can't be as good as I am, so just eat this chunk of meat. And I'm not doing it, but yeah, it's for you. So to me, that's kind of also playing in this kind of in the soft bigotry of low expectations a bit, with that. So I don't know. To me, I remain completely unconvinced. And by the way, I think we've been misrepresented, because we never said that we would prefer a world. We would not prefer a world without animal exploitation if it uses a feather or something like that. That's a complete misrepresentation, because we have an alternative where we don't exploit animals at all, and we also don't use any animals' body parts or anything, even if they fell off them. So we have that possibility. So we just need the willpower to do so. And I don't think it's because people love meat too much, because that's not the thing. I think we all vegans here, we all used to love certain animal-based dishes and whatnot. I mean, the British people here, well, the fish and chips, and the Chilean guy here with the completos and all that. So, you know, and me as a Venezuelan with the tequeños and all of that. That's like, so we all have our dishes, traditional things, cultural things, but we dish them out with like, no, this is completely wrong, and we understand why it's wrong. So to not advocate for that to others would be a disservice to the animals, and basically to ourselves. We're basically saying that we're useless. So that's just it.
Okay, thank you, AJ. Thank you, everyone, for the closing statements there. Now I get to have my fun, because I'm going to ask each of you some little pressing questions. I've got 2 questions prepared for each individual. I've been taking little notes slyly in the background during the debate. So I'm now going to try and push each of you a little bit on your position. I'm going to start with Ryan. Now, Ryan, you alluded earlier to the idea that, well, if the mentality doesn't, it doesn't really matter if the mentality doesn't change. Like, say we could clone we had lab-grown women or something like that, because it's resulting in no action. Does that not fail to take into consideration that the mentality just staying the same leaves an openness in the future for something to just spring up? Like, say we do get your way and have lab-grown meat, and people still will see animals as resources, but by your logic earlier, you were saying, well, but it doesn't matter because we wouldn't be eating animals. Well, in 10 years' time, why wouldn't someone just say, well, we do eat animal flesh. What's so wrong with me going out and stabbing this cow to death? I mean, because the mentality hasn't changed.
Yeah, I mean, that reinforces the idea to me that the mentality is instrumental to getting these changes. So with the woman example, in the hypothetical that we were given, we controlled for the variable of that was what was being changed. So that outcome got changed. If you could make the case that there's a 50% chance that in the future more sentient beings or more women will be exploited because there's no mentality shift, and we just change the action and with no mentality, then I would totally agree. And that's why I think we need vegan education. That's why I invest so much of my time in vegan education. We need them hand in hand, and I think they actually work better hand in hand. But it still doesn't mean that we ought not pursue these things where the people who aren't reachable yet for the mindset can't change their actions towards something that's better.
Cool. Thank you, Ryan. Vicente, I've got a question for you now. Now, you obviously oppose lab-grown meat being done as a thing for humans. Should we at least not innovate it for carnivorous animals that we have in our care? Would you see a moral issue with that?
Yes, I think so. You mean lab-grown meat? The most ideal one without...
Well, let's say, Vicente, I have a snake in my care, and currently my only options are to either murder the snake, release the snake into the wild so they murder animals, or murder animals for my snake. Is lab-grown meat not a viable option for me to feed this snake that I could have?
Well, in that context, as vegan, we shouldn't advocate for such a scenario in the first place, because we should end domestication.
Sure. But in this hypothetical, I have got this snake, and they're obviously I wouldn't have a snake, whatever. But I'm saying, and obviously we all want animal domestication. We all see that as wrong, whatever, to have a snake in our care, whatever it is. But as a viable solution, the point is the snake is in my care, right? I've got this snake. I've got a few options, right? It's either kill the snake, release the snake into the wild so they can kill more animals. I kill animals for my snake, or I give them lab-grown meat. Perfect. Is lab-grown meat not a viable solution?
Release the snake. Absolutely.
But why would you choose to release the snake and that snake cause horrendous suffering and death to all the other animals in the wild when I could just feed them a piece of lab-grown meat?
Yes, I oppose domestication, of course. Cats and dogs and the typical animals that we domesticate, It's our fault that they exist. We artificially select them to be absolutely dependent on us. So the remaining cats and dogs, we should take care of them as humanity, but we should stop breeding them. But snakes is a different case because snakes can live in their own terms. So we shouldn't have it domesticated in the first place. So we should liberate them.
Okay, Jordan, coming to you now. I guess one thing I would ask you is, me and you we talk a lot about like societal problems and all that kind of stuff. Now, are you not appeasing these kind of weak-willed carnists in society by sort of talking so much during the debate about, you know, the taste pleasure that we want to kind of have lab-grown meat that it appeases them for in that way? And do you not see that as promoting like a weak-willed society that could ultimately be harmful? Because I think there could be a danger here, no, is if we don't just all of us here have managed to be vegan, right? We're managing to do it perfectly fine. Do you not see a danger of kind of appeasing to carnists for taste pleasure and just being like, yeah, you know what, just be weak-willed, we'll give you this like flesh and guts and stuff that you want to eat, rather than just changing that kind of mentality?
Yeah, I mean, you could obviously frame it, and it's. I made the argument myself that it's an easier sell. So if you can obviously frame that in the words of more weak-willed. The question is whether I think there's a moral issue with that. Like if we weren't talking about animals, if someone wanted something and they really craved that thing, and there was option A that was kind of like it, and option B that was much closer to it, that they would obviously want that thing that's closer to it. Now you could still say, yeah, but shouldn't they learn to deal with option A and not get what they want? Sure, but if there isn't an ethical issue with that, then I don't see a problem with being more weak-willed. So I might concede the idea that it is more weak-willed, but I don't see a moral issue with that if no harm is being caused. And I'll go one step further. Obviously, we didn't talk about it in this debate, but I'm more than okay, obviously, with all current vegans starting to eat lab-grown meat. So you could make the argument even more so that, oh, now we're becoming more weaker, but who cares? Again, you could make that argument for plant-based meat. Like your point just, George, was we're all doing okay. Well, we're all doing okay with not that great vegan fish alternatives out. But if a great vegan fish alternative that comes out that's just like fish and chips, you could make the argument of, yeah, but aren't we being now a bit weak-willed if we're just going to have the really realistic plant-based fish and chips? But who cares if a fish isn't being harmed or exploited? So that would be my answer to that question.
All right, cool. Cheers, Jordan. AJ, a little question for you now. So can you hear me, AJ? He says 1 second.
Yeah, just a second, because I'm cool. Trying to switch to the PC because the cell battery is just dying right now. So I'm trying to change to the PC, but I just have it right here next to me. So it's just a switch and that's it. So I'll just be back. Okay.
Yep. Okay.
Just gonna be a moment. Okay.
Cool. Maybe I'll ask Vicente then the next pressing question. So Vicente, how would you respond to the accusation that people on the pro side might say in the comments and during the debate and whoever supports it? How would you respond to the accusation that maybe you're letting purity get in the way of animal liberation? You know, definitions of words, you know, adhering to the philosophy and stuff like that, rather than just saying, okay, look, this isn't perfect, but this is like this is what's going to end. Yeah.
I get it would be a fair point if I wouldn't provide an alternative that is both moral and practical, I think, which is, as I already said, vegan education. And I think it's important to have the vegan message clear. It's not just a matter of semantics, because it translates into the action. And if we want to end animal exploitation, that is a vegan goal, then our means should be coherent with that goal, but not just because of moral purity. Morality has always considered practicality, the real world. So I think that having clear definitions leads to actions that really points in the right direction. If we don't have a clear message and a clear definition of veganism, we can just move in circles. I think on this, like saying, yeah, this welfare reform could help, but I don't see it. I see that welfare reforms they are concrete measures that may be tempting to consider them because they are concrete, institutionally speaking, but I don't think they point in the right direction. And that's my main message, that we should think as a movement with direction, and the direction is given by the definition.
Okay, thank you, Vicente. Ryan, another question here for you then, your last pressing question from me. So my question for you, Ryan, is why lab-grown flesh? Why all this work going into lab-grown actual animal flesh when we can just put all this tech we have into making like super realistic plant-based meats? And I'm very sure we could replicate it almost perfectly in the future. Like, does it not seem a little weird, kind of pandering to like a zombie-like addiction for people eating actual real flesh, when instead you can invest so much time into just creating seriously good like plant-based meat?
Yeah, I would say that the most similar plant-based meat we have on the market is probably closer to the process of lab-grown meat or precision fermentation or all these other newer initiatives than most people think. Food science is a really big spectrum of what goes on, and these two things are like both sort of on this side. For example, take the Beyond or Impossible Burger, I forgot which one, or he uses like artificial like heme iron, that sort of thing. Like a lot of these processes are the same. Lab-grown meat's a lot like brewing. We already do it for beer and other things like that. So, and then to answer your question directly, I think it's just because the plant-based ones aren't up to par currently, and I don't think it's going to be like, I think they've already saturated about as far as they likely can go. The reason why all this billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars of investments going into lab-grown meat is because from when people have tried it and tasted it, it's a step above in terms of replicating what the plant-based meat does. Plant-based meat, sometimes you can't tell, especially if it's in like mixed in with other things like in pasta or sandwich, that sort of thing. But with the cultivated meat, it can be quite literally impossible because it's bioidentical. So and we're creatures of habit. We have our senses and taste and smell and all these different things. People grow up with what they're familiar with, and getting it to as close as possible to the real thing, or quite literally actually the real thing, is quite why those metrics of why people eat what they eat for taste, convenience, price, but especially that taste one, it is why it's important for those people who are unreachable in the current moment. So yeah.
Cool, thanks, Ryan. Right, I would go to AJ now, but he's vanished. So I guess I will go to Jordan for my last question for him. And then hopefully AJ's back. And if not, I'll have to pass my questions for him that I had on to Vicente to answer. So Jordan, oh, hold on. He's coming back. Everything okay, AJ?
Yeah, it's just I try switching to the PC, but no.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. My PC is trash, so no.
Oh, having a bit of a nightmare today. Okay, well, you're just in time because I was about to ask you your question, and then I had to defer to Jordan, but I didn't ask Jordan's yet. But it is actually your turn.
All
so,
right.
AJ, I guess my question for you would be: now, from your closing statement, I get the idea that you think this won't happen anyway. We're not going to get to a world where all slaughterhouses were shut down and blah, blah, blah through lab-grown meat. But let's say, hypothetically, in a world where the only meat we had was lab-grown meat, all slaughterhouses are abolished, animal farms are abolished. What would be the issue with people eating lab-grown meat and saying vegans supported this? And even looking back and saying, wow, I can't believe we actually used to murder animals for this? I mean, what would be the problem with that? Because would the mentality there not be abolished anyway? And would even, you might even say, even in that world, lab grown meat might even phase out eventually, because people might just find it a bit weird, like a relic of the past. So what would be an issue in that world with saying, well, vegans supported this?
I mean, but in this hypothetical, we stopped exploiting animals because of the lab-grown meat. Like, this was the thing that saved them.
Yeah, so all farms are shut down, slaughterhouses are shut down, and people are saying, thank God we have lab-grown meat and we don't murder animals anymore. And vegans were the ones were change makers in this. What would be wrong with that?
I mean, there could be several issues with this, because, like I said also before, like, is this thing, even if it achieves this hypothetical, doesn't address all the other issues with the animals. Like, are we still exploiting animals for other reasons rather than just food? And just because you made some food in a laboratory doesn't mean that animals aren't being treated as something else, like that pet snake or something like that in that other hypothetical. So I don't know. It's like, I mean, to me, it's mostly just wishful thinking. But let's say that it does succeed and this lab-grown meat doesn't use animals at all, and it's the only thing available in meat, in the meat section, let's say, it's the only thing. I mean, I guess I wouldn't consume it for sure, but if it's the thing that, I don't know, it's just, I just don't see it. That's the problem. I just don't see it happening. So to me, that's difficult to think of this hypothetical, because I don't know. It's like, I just don't see it. I fail to see how that happens. Like, I don't know. It would be too weird for it to happen. Like, the reason we stop exploiting animals in farms and slaughterhouses is because of this innovation. I don't know. It seems like too far-fetched, but I don't know, if it happens, I guess, yeah, sure, good. But I would not be like, I don't know, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, I don't know.
Okay, yep. Jordan, then my last question for you is, would you see a moral problem with us creating lab-grown baby flesh to satisfy cannibals? And would you be okay sitting around someone in a restaurant, say a table near you, who was just chewing on like a bucket of baby legs or something like that? Would you see that as like a morally depraved thing that had to happen?
Whether I'd see it as like personally a bit weird and gross because of my own kind of societal, what we in the West, it is one point, but I certainly wouldn't have a moral issue with it. The difference is with that analogy, of course, is that there could be this, like, I don't know, like, well, the bigger point is that there's very, very few cannibals. And so, sure, if the cannibals were eating that, or if even other people were eating that, that would be okay, especially if it was reducing the number of kids being, killed by cannibals or something. But that could lead people to really start to enjoy. I'd still be fine with it, but there is at least the argument that it could lead a very small amount of people to think, this is really nice. Like, let's say it was really hard to get hold of. Some thick individuals could start to think, right, now I'm going to start going out and getting kids. But in the lab grown sense, everyone except this very small amount of vegans already eats meat. And so it can only be a moral good the more people that step away from animal farming. But something new like baby flesh, like, yeah, it's still morally fine, but there is at least the argument that it could make a very small percentage of people start to then obtain this lab-grown baby flesh in unethical ways. So that's the difference for me.
Cool, thanks, Jordan. And then the final question is for AJ again. So AJ, my final question for you would be, if you were going to be sent to a gas chamber along with a significant other number of people, let's say there was like some kind of human genocide was going to happen, but it was for meat. Let's say we were going to round up and kill Venezuelans or something to be eaten, and you guys were going to be herded off into the gas chambers. And the only way to stop it would be for you, AJ, to just have a biopsy taken, and for these cannibals who are rounding up the Venezuelans to just eat your flesh, but only from a simple biopsy. Would you not think that it would be crazy to oppose that idea, to just have the simple biopsy taken to save you and the other people being herded up to be murdered?
Okay, no, I mean, it's the whole thing is wrong. You understand? Like the whole thing is completely wrong. It shouldn't happen in the first place. Like the gas chamber thing and the rounding up of the people to consumers, like it shouldn't happen. So that's the thing. I don't negotiate with terrorists. Basically, in this case, these cannibal tribe people or whatever it is, like just mow them down or just like lock them up or whatever. Like it doesn't need, none of that needs to happen. Why are we giving them something to take pleasure from anyway?
Sure,
So,
but in
no.
I guess just in my hypothetical there, I'm saying the only way to stop it would be for you to have a biopsy taken. And that would stop. They would accept this. The people doing it would say, "Okay, yeah, we're happy with this as a solution." Would you not just consent to having the biopsy taken?
I mean, yeah, in that context, I guess if I'm not given any other option for some reason, like I'm just there and I'm going to either be put in a gas chamber or just take a biopsy, then sure, I guess I'll take the biopsy. But that's the thing is that none of it had to happen like that. So,
Of course,
and
yeah.
of course, I'm a consenting human, so obviously I can say yes or no or whatever. But
Can I say something then? Sorry, about these hypotheticals in general. Sorry, I interrupted.
Sure,
You
go on.
finished first. But AJ, were you about to say something first?
I mean, yeah, but the problem with these hypotheticals is that they present a false dichotomy where in the real world application this is not the thing, because as Vicente has said already, we do have that third option, which is don't do any of this at all. So I understand that in certain dire situations we might in a desperation move we might do something that goes against what we believe or something like that in a given moment or something. Like I don't consider myself someone who would ever murder someone else, but if they're threatening my life or something, then it might come to that. But it's like these hypotheticals. That's why I'm not really a friend of these hypotheticals where they just present you option 1 or 2, but they're false, because in the real world application it doesn't happen like that. It's not a this or that or either or. Is we have something else that we can do and we know that we have it. So I don't know. I mean, obviously in that context, sure, I take the biopsy, but afterwards I'm coming back with a baseball bat and bashing those cannibals,
Okay, cool. Right. Did you want to say something quickly, Vicente, or shall I?
Yeah, about the hypotheticals. Apart from being a false dichotomy, is that they are seen as isolated cases. But the problem is that if they are the idea is somehow they shouldn't apply them to make an institutional system that perpetuates that hypothetical. I am explaining myself, because lab grown meat, for example, is a system, an institutional system that perpetuates this hypothetical situation that we recognize as a tragic, isolated case that we don't want it to be perpetuated. And also, if AJ donates their cells, it will be a moral virtue for him, but not his moral obligation. And veganism deals with moral obligations. Sorry, just that.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks, guys. That's all the questions I have for you today. I will now read the super chats because we've got about 20 minutes left. Veghead donates £4.99. Thank you so much, Veghead. It says, eat fruit and don't multiply. Yeah, thank you for that. Not a question, just a statement. This one, well, I think I know Vicente's answer, so I guess this will be AJ, because I know Jordan and Ryan will just say they agree with this. So Omni, that's the plant-based dog food brand here in the UK. They're going to make a cultivated cat food, which I assume is using animal cells to actually feed cats. Vicente, from your last answer, I'm pretty sure you would actually be against that because you said
Yes.
no for the snake at least. AJ, would you be against that?
I mean, yeah, I would be against that. I mean, if it uses, like I said, if it uses animals, then yeah, I'm against it. But not only that, it's just that the cat is like not a pet also. So that's another animal oppression thing that we're doing. We're doing the double whammy basically. Like, so it's like it doesn't need to happen. Like, why are we creating foods for animals that we don't even need to keep in our homes? So that's the other thing. So I don't know. The whole thing is just we're trying to correct one wrong with another one. So I don't know. Like, that's how I view it.
Okay, non-available has sent, I think, I'm assuming this is a mistake because they've made 2 donations. So thank you very much with pretty much the same comment. Non-available sends 10 Canadian dollars twice, and they say, convincing a Middle Easterner to completely quit eating his kebabs and shawarma, then convincing an Irishman and a German to quit drinking beer. But I do like the consenting human burger idea. Thank you so much. Not available. Animals Are Beautiful People says, if you were a cow, you would choose. What would you choose, slaughter or lab-grown meat? I guess we've kind of alluded to that slightly with my question towards the end. But AJ or Vicente, I don't know if you wanted to briefly respond to that question.
Yeah, it's like we've said all along, it's a false dichotomy because there's that other option to just leave them alone. So it's not an either or situation.
Okay. Animals Are Beautiful People also says, for diehard carnists, vegans should support lab-grown meat. I guess a lot of that has been discussed anyway during the debate. Thank you. They say again, lab-grown meat isn't vegan, but that isn't the point. Do you know what? I think I'll ask Ryan or Jordan the question now, actually. Ryan and Jordan, do you consider lab-grown meat to be vegan?
I don't think it's vegan yet. I think it will be once it's sold at supermarkets, the scale, all that sort of thing. Because then the individual dollar, the supply and demand doesn't go for any company, even the ones that still are taking stem cells. Doesn't any of that go to that? It's sort of like I think taking vaccines that were tested on animals is likely doesn't really cause any more demand for animal testing because it was done, and then taking the vaccine doesn't cause any more animal testing after that. If anything, it likely reduces it because then they don't have to be tested on more again in the future. If people aren't taking the vaccine doesn't work. So similar like that. So yeah, I don't think it's like vegan yet, but I think once it's at to scale, it will be vegan. I don't know if you have different thoughts, Jordan.
Yeah. Oh, Jordan, you're muted.
I can hear you.
Hold on, I've unmuted you. Oh, wait. No, go on.
Now I've got a cough. Basically the same answer. It's vegan in the sense that Impossible Foods is vegan in the sense that it doesn't adhere to vegan principles, but the food itself is plant-based, which isn't obviously strictly vegan. That said, I'd be cool with a vegan even eating lab-grown meat now, because if anything, like Ryan just said, I don't think it's not going to result in more exploitation. And if anything, it just furthers the demand and support for lab-grown meat, which is obviously something we support anyway. So yeah, it might not be vegan now, but it will be vegan once it's past any need of needing animal cells or extraction involved. Yeah.
And I will add that once I think it's out, I think not as an obligation, but I think it would be a good idea if vegans pump up that demand, get it going initially too, so they have more money to keep growing the industry. So it gets improvements so that non-vegans eat it. So yeah.
Cool. And then I guess this one is directed at the anti-side who say that education is what we need. Animals Are Beautiful People says, look at Cosmic Septic. education isn't enough. What do you both say to that, AJ and Vicente?
Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about that?
Do we have 3 more hours?
But yeah, no, dude, but no. I'm actually preparing a video about it, about his latest, anti-vegan nonsense. But I mean, sure, vegan education, but we have to take that guy was educated in the first place. He was just educated in utilitarianism and welfareism by Peter Singer and others. So he was never a vegan. He never held the vegan principle. He just held the principle of reducing suffering and stuff. So that's not veganism. So he was never really a vegan, and he just said he was, and then everyone just fell in love with him. So it's like, no, it wasn't like that. So he was never really. So I don't know. He was just another utilitarian welfarist. That's it.
In fact, that is approved. When one of your pressing questions for me was, why is it important to have a clear vegan message or this purist thing? And my point was just that we have to be clear what veganism is, and it's not, because it translates into the practical world and the means we used to get to that point. And since Cosmic Skeptic wasn't well educated in veganism, he never understood it. He, a few days ago, just talked about veganism being about the reduction of suffering, and he came with this crop death thing. He never understood veganism, so it reinforced the point that education is key, but education of what veganism actually is. If not, don't call yourself a vegan. In Cosmic Skeptic, I think, was never a vegan. So education in the good sense of real veganism.
Okay, another super chat here. My carnist brother is waiting for lab-grown meat, so I guess just the idea that there are non-vegans who will eat it. Got another one here. Not bigotry, accepting human hypocrisy. I say again, AJ, people have different degrees of empathy and hypocrisy. And then another one for you, AJ. Thanks for all these super chats, by the way. Animals are beautiful people. Really appreciate it. AJ, this dire situation equals cow's situation right now. Okay, do you want to answer that, AJ? Because I think that might be responding to what you said a moment ago in response to one of my questions for you. You were saying it's like maybe some kind of false dichotomy. But the point is, for cows right now, or future cows who would be bred, lab meat taken from a biopsy animal is saving those animals from being murdered. So how do you respond to that?
Sure, from a utilitarian perspective, sure, that there's like a number of victims, but that's just the production of it, but it doesn't tell me about the consumption of the product or anything like that, like the acceptance of the product. It's just the production that, in theory, that reduces the need for this exploitation and stuff. But I don't know, to me it's just like, when I went vegan, that's it. I just understood that the animals had no time. It was a dire situation, just like animals are beautiful people is saying. Like, that's what I understood. And I understood it right there and then. And that's why I went vegan. I wasn't saying, oh, I'm going to go vegan once technology that isn't even here yet exists, then I'll go vegan. Which is something I kind of used to say back in the day, like, when they make vegans, I'm gonna go vegan. That's something that I used to say, and it was not true, because obviously I just wasn't seeing the actual reality of things. So I don't know. It's just, like I said, it's just vegan education what we need, not this. We cannot wait for some novelty product to do what we can, like what we apparently cannot do.
Okay, thank you, AJ. Great name here. Leguminati sends, is that 50,000 Vietnamese dong, maybe? I don't know what that currency is. If anyone knows the D logo, I think that looks like maybe the Vietnamese currency. But Leguminati, this is at you, Jordan. Jordan, perpetuating the supremacist mentality that animals are resources goes against veganism. Will you change the festival name to Utilitarian Campout?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a loaded question. You can call it supremacist mentality. I would obviously disagree with that. Whether lab-grown meat is still seeing animals as resources can even be debated. But even if it is, as I've said 100 times, I don't think there's anything wrong with seeing something as a resource if no exploitation or harm is being caused, especially if there's a solution to that, which lab-grown meat would be. As for the last bit, that's very funny. I do say in my talk last year that there's no such thing as two vegans. Vegans disagree on almost every issue there is, but calling the festival people who care about animal rights and want to live in a world that can achieve animal rights camp out is far too long of a name. So the name stays as a generic word, whilst vegans don't have all that much harmony on issues as even this debate shows, because if anything, lab grown meat is one of the issues where most vegans do support it, but there are so many issues where way more vegans are conflicting. So
Yeah, thank you for that question and donation and Laguna Minati. And I just want to say, even if people in the live chat do disagree with any of Jordan's views and stuff in this, the camp out is still a fantastic event, and it's definitely worth going to. If anyone is able to come to the UK this year for the camp out in July, it is very much worthwhile. And there's, Jordan has speakers of a whole variety on. There'll be people on stage who agree with Jordan about stuff, disagree with Jordan about stuff, and it's a great event, and it turns people vegan, and it makes people active as well. It has activism workshops, everything. So you don't need to be like a utilitarian or whatever to go to the camp out or to support the innovation of lab-grown meat, or be whatever it is. So everyone, please don't be put off going to vegan camp out just because of different opinions and stuff going around. Just check if there's any more comments or anything like that responding to just in the normal live chat. But I think
if I may, there was Entice the Lyrical Vegan said something along the lines of, it seems shocking that there's people promoting like lab-grown meat who also do AV and cubes. It's open invitation. If anybody wants to talk about that, you're welcome to. You can also just set up a phone call, just talk about that sort of thing if you have questions, concerns, because I want the community's feedback. But yeah, like totally willing to talk to you guys. So I guess that way the best way to do that is through Instagram. Yeah, you can just if you just look up Ryan Blum, that should come up.
I've also got
Entice. People would. Oh, go on. I was just going to say I'm surprised people would see that as such a big contradiction, because doesn't Gary I can never say his name, George Urosky, support lab-grown meat himself? Not that he's the founder of AV or anything, but
he not only supports it, he said he will take the first biopsy from an animal himself if we were to have for lab-grown meat. And I'm sure I could find the video somewhere, but Gary very much supports lab-grown meat. Yeah, so you can see that the opinion on it across legit activists is very much diverse as well.
Yeah, I thought about mentioning it, but I didn't want to like appeal to authority sort of thing. But I do know that there are very hardcore abolitionists, the most hardcore abolitionists, who are as pro as this gets, I will say.
And there are also abolitionists which are against. So
yep,
absolutely. All right, cool. Well, look, yeah, there's not really much more questions or anything in the normal chat, or there probably are, but the debate is just raging on in there. Oh, hold on, we've got one just coming from Floris. Question for Ryan: an accusation of utilitarianism was made against your side that is still on the table. Could you clarify your ethical framework?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where my normative ethics land. At some point, I considered myself a threshold deontologist. Now I'm not really sure. I sort of go back and forth, but I value both rights and utility. At least rights instrumental to utility or inherently. So I sort of go back and forth, but I'm very sympathetic still to threshold deontology.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I think we'll end it there, guys. So thank you all so much for coming on to the debate today. I really enjoyed moderating it, and I think it's going to be a really good thing to listen back to, and it's going to create much needed discussion and stuff in the movement. So, guys, if you just want to stay behind in the room for a while, and we'll end the stream there. But yeah, thank you everyone in the comments for watching along today, and we hope that you found it a useful stream and a good use of your time to watch this along today. And yeah, please share everywhere and create the conversation. And if more people want to come on for streams about anything, you know, including this topic, debate anyone about anything, please let me know, because I'm happy to host further debates about this. But thank you everyone, and until next time.